Will Smith has now responded to Jada's book for the first time. Let's put up the picture full mask. A lot of twists and turns. Put on your seatbelt. No, Jada has not married Tupac's hologram, at least not yet. But I still predict that will come. After all of the controversy surrounding Jada Pinkett Smith, her memoir, her husband, Will Smith, has finally responded online. So Will posted a video that said that he turned off all his notifications, all right? Here it is.
Fun fact about me, I can take a nap almost anywhere.
Okay. Yeah. So he also said supportive things, all right? Despite some unflattering things that were said about him in the book, he publicly supports the memoir. Here it is.
All right, you guys. This is the first time I'm going to see the book. We're all together. I have not seen the book yet. We just got the first time.
I also have a letter from Will. Right? Okay. Congrats, Dink. I just turned the final page of Worthy, and damn. Gonna get you to do the damn. How would he say it?
Damn.
I just turned the final page of Worthy, and damn. It is amazing to realize that despite having lived most of my life by your side, I still found myself shocked and stunned and caught off guard. Laughing, then inspired, then heartbroken. I was all over the place. It's one thing to hear anecdotes at a family barbecue, but it was truly overwhelming to take in your story potently condensed in this way. You are one of one, a rare blend of power and delicate sensitivity. I know it wasn't easy to excavate the depths in that way. I applaud and honor you. If I had read this book 30 years ago, I definitely would have hugged you more. I'll start now. Welcome to the Authors Club. I love you endlessly. Now go get some Merlot and take a rest.
He know I can't have no more love. That's beautiful. And that's why I can't divorce that joker.
No, that ain't why. Put up the picture of Will Smith and Jada again for me, because I got a couple of questions here. But first of all, it was a very sweet letter. I really wish I could believe it. But you all deceived us for 7 years about your marital status, and so much so that Will Smith slapped a whole grown man on the Oscars in front of the world over a lie. You all were not even together, not living together, not romantically involved. He said he did it because, well, you know. So I have a hard time believing anything. I don't know what's staged, what's choreographed, what's coordinated, what's for the camera, and what's legit, what's real. That's my dilemma. Let's put up Chris Rock, Jada. I told you there's going to be some twists and turns here. As previously claiming that Chris Rock did ask her out on a date years ago, when rumors of a divorce was swirling, Jada shared about her reaction to Rock's special that talked about the Oscar slap. And in an interview with the New York Times, Pinkett Smith reveals that Rock's words bothered her. I remember my heart piercing, my heart cracking, and I remember my feelings being so hurt. And then I remember being able to smile and wish him well at the same time. Now, I'm going to just pause at this moment. Now, if you remember that moment, Will Smith was laughing at the joke. Go back to the video, you will see Will Smith was laughing at the joke until he looked at Jada. Then he went up and slapped a human being. All right. Pinkett also stated why she is speaking out on everything now. At the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, or Chris is on his deathbed, or Will is on his deathbed, or whoever. All this doesn't matter. That's true. And so just learning how to exist in that pocket right now, not waiting until I'm on my deathbed. Let's do it right now. Okay? Jada also claimed that Tupac, you know you're going to go back to Tupac. If you're talking about Jada, you're going to talk about Tupac. Okay? And it's really unfair to Will. How can you compete with a dead ancestor? You can't compete with that. Anyway, while in jail at Rikers, she claims that the rapper proposed to her and she declined the proposal. Now, the only reason I bring this up is because there has been a massive dispute of this claim. Here it is.
Jada is currently on her Pay Attention to Me tour, and she is making all these wild claims, including that Tupac proposed to her while he was at Rikers. Really? The math isn't mathing, so let's take a look. Tupac was convicted of sexual assault charges on February 8th, 1995. From there, he was sent to Rikers Prison, only to be transferred less than a month later to Clinton Correctional Facility. And she specifically said she went to see him. This was not on the phone.
But when I go to see him in Rikers, probably one of the more painful parts, seeing him there, the condition that he was in, and having to leave him there.
Well, so prior to going into Rikers, Tupac already had a girlfriend named Keisha. He proposed to Keisha, her words, in a September 2011 interview. He proposed to Keisha before he even went into prison. They were already engaged. They got married in April. And in the time that he got sentenced and was taken to prison, Keisha actually moved closer to be by him and be by the prison and saw him on a near daily basis.
When he asked me to get married, he was at Rikers.
So you're telling me that in the 3 to 4 week window that he was at Rikers, engaged to another woman who had moved closer to the prison and was there almost every day, Tupac proposed to Jada. But hey, Jess, you might be saying to yourself, Tupac wasn't known to be a one-woman man. He was no angel. Fair enough. Let's see where Jada was during February of 1995, which was, as we've already established, the only time she would have been able to see Tupac at Rikers since he was only there for less than a month. See, Jada had already met Will Smith in 1994 on the set of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but Will Smith was married, so nothing happened between them. But in February of 1995, Will Smith was served divorce papers by his wife. 5 days later, on February 19th, Will called Jada and said, "Are you single?" And she said, "Yep." Will said, "We're together now." Jada said, "Cool." And she immediately flew to LA. For the record, Keisha and Tupac stayed married for about 10 months. They got their marriage annulled about 4 or 5 months after Tupac was released from prison. He was bailed out by Suge Knight. It wasn't long after that he met Kidada Jones. Kidada and Tupac were living together and engaged when Tupac was shot and killed. Kidada was the one that was there with him at the hospital the night he died. Kidada was handed his bloody clothes. She was the one who told him, "We all love you," before he slipped into a coma and never woke up. Keisha spoke with Tupac several days before he died, because even though their marriage was annulled, they still remained good friends. And I can't help but notice that all of the women who are actually part of his life in a meaningful way are the ones that have just kept quiet. They've kept silent. They've kept their memories to themselves and not tried to use a dead man as their limelight. And the person who's squawking about him the most is making claims that can't even be verified and don't make sense.
And I gotta say, that's not the only influencer who has put together a significantly contrary timeline of events. David, it had to be done.
Look, I'm glad there are people out there who serve the role of journalism to try to see if any of this stuff makes sense and measures up, whether the dates match. So good to this influencer to expose this. I tend to think that, most people's relationships are complicated. And so I don't make judgments about, Jada or Will Smith or what they went through. But when you start to leverage the public perceptions about you to sell movies or to sell books, that's where I start to get a little bit sort of squeamish. And it does seem like so much of what they've been saying for the last several years was simply for their public reputations that they would then monetize, not because it was necessarily the truth.
Right. And listen, I know some people are going to push back on me for talking about it and being critical, and I'm going to say this. All right. They brought this to us via the red table. They could have just talked about it at the dinner table, and none of this would be public. That's my comment.
And this ain't no J-Lo bashing because she's crazy, talented.
Right.
So I saw her at the upfronts. It was me and Danny DeVito. And he's like, that's Jennifer Lopez over there. You know her, right? I'm like, yeah, I know her. So I go over there and I'm like, what's up, girl? You blew up. What is going on? She's like, hi. Get some little carrot dip. And I'm going, what's in that carrot dip? Because she's your dipping my ass.
All my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle, pay the price. Want a slice, got to roll the dice. That's why all my life, I've been grinding all my life. All my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle, pay the price. Want a slice, got to roll the dice. That's why all my life, I've been grinding all my life.
What up, guys? Your boy Quake, and if there's someone to troll and somewhat speak allegedly the truth.
Linking all these tragedies, linking them to you, the death of Notorious B.I.G., I guess on paper would make more sense, given what he was racking up sales on the East Coast.
I mean,
when Biggie left.
One of the things about Biggie, I'm not one of these nut riders. I think he was talented. He's great.
Did you hate Biggie?
Never, one bit. See, one thing you gotta realize, follow my talent. I'm a businessman. I figure if in a year or two, Biggie would have been a death row artist because that's how talented he was. And I would have pursued him as an artist because I felt I could have gave him a bigger deal. And I would have been in his videos. So I think he was an incredible artist. Just think, Tupac and Biggie, and there was no real feud. They might have had words before, but I know I could have molded them back to being great friends.
But linking all these tragedies, linking them to you, the death of Notorious B.I.G., I guess.
Trip to Los Angeles, seeking information leading to the
Valentino giving me
Who killed rap? A new documentary is asking an old question. Who killed rapper Tupac Shakur? And now a former Compton officer is offering a $100,000 challenge to the man he's convinced was behind the murder. Chris Blatchford has the latest developments.
This scene has haunted Las Vegas investigators for 11 years. And detectives there are now planning a fresh trip to Los Angeles, seeking information leading to the gunman who shot up this BMW and killed rap star Tupac Shakur.
It wasn't a random shooting.
Former Tupac bodyguard Frank Alexander. In this new documentary released in October, recounts 24 bodyguards that night were told not to carry weapons. He now believes this fight in involving Tupac and a rival Crip gang member at the MGM Hotel was staged so the rival could later be blamed for Tupac's murder. A setup, he charges, orchestrated by Death Row Records CEO Marion Suge Knight and Reggie Wright Jr., the record company's security chief.
It could not have happened in the way that it did without them having knowledge of it.
But Suge says, why would he order Tupac shot knowing he'd be sitting right next to him in the BMW? He says he had nothing to do with Tupac's murder.
God knows the truth. And when it comes down to it, it's not one person in the world by any sense of know I have anything to do with getting Tupac shot.
And Reggie Wright gave an interview to AllHipHop.com saying the documentary is filled with outright lies. But Kevin Hackett, another former Tupac bodyguard, is challenging Reggie Wright Jr.'s truthfulness.
I'm offering Reggie right now $100K to take a polygraph. That he had no involvement whatsoever to do with Tupac's killing.
Hackett, according to these court filings, worked for 2 years as an undercover agent for the FBI and ATF, helping the feds.
To investigate Marion Knight and Death Row Records for racketeering violations.
And Hackett, a former Compton School District police officer who worked off-duty hours as a Tupac bodyguard, now reveals to Fox 11 News an interesting series of events. He says, here at the House of Blues in 1996, an off-duty Santa Monica cop working security confiscated a .40 caliber Glock handgun similar to this from a member of Tupac Shakur's entourage.
About 2 weeks after that, I was contacted by Reggie to go over to Santa Monica Police Department to pick up this firearm.
Hackett says he first showed the handgun to his FBI handlers and then turned it over to Reggie Wright Jr. A month later in Las Vegas, investigators say it was a .40 Glock handgun that killed Tupac Shakur. Hackett believes the murder weapon was the same gun he gave Reggie Wright Jr.
I believe it is.
And here's why. Hackett says he asked Wright about the .40 Glock.
He stated once I gave him that firearm, he gave it back to his daddy, who at the time was a lieutenant of Compton Police over the gang division. He stated his daddy booked that firearm in the property, which, you know, is really and truly far-fetched.
And Hackett says 6 months after Tupac's murder, he had another conversation with Reggie Jr. about the missing handgun. It didn't go well.
Reggie told me, you know, hey, at any given time, you know, I have the money, I have the people, I can have you killed at any given time.
Hackett says he told his FBI handlers, and according to these transcripts obtained by Fox 11, also told LAPD detectives a decade ago that Wright had threatened, I can have you killed at any given time. Reggie Wright Jr. declined an on-camera interview, but in a written statement told us, I had nothing to do with Pac's death. He calls Hackett and former bodyguard Frank Alexander liars. But it's Hackett who was offering the truth challenge.
My 100,000 sitting here. I want Reggie to put up 100,000. I will gladly take a polygraph, and I will gladly take his money, and I'll go ahead and start a college fund for underprivileged kids in Las Vegas under Tupac's name.
In response, Wright tells Hackett, pay for it, set it up, let's do it. The polygraph challenge, he claims, is only a ruse to publicize Alexander's new Tupac documentary. A DVD Hackett says he has nothing to do with.
The only thing I want here is for Reggie to be arrested.
Hackett says a polygraph will determine who is the real liar.
Meanwhile, Las Vegas detectives say they plan to meet with Hackett and hear his allegations. And Hackett hopes his statements will be enough to interest a grand jury. Chris Blatchford, Fox 11 News.
Should be in the court and not get hit. Just can you explain as a law enforcement?
Okay, I'm going to explain something to you right here.
Okay.
We got the vehicle. We're going to say vehicle number 1, which is vehicle to the left. We got vehicle number 2, which is Fox's subscribe. We got vehicle number 3, the suspect vehicle. The suspect vehicle pulled up in close proximity, if I remember correctly. It was probably a foot and a half from him pulled up. The suspect, as the vehicle pulled up, the driver came out, arm came out, point blank. Their car was approximately 2 or 3 feet ahead of Suge's car, whereas there's no way possible the shooter, he would have got his intended target. Okay? That's just reality.
He should though. I mean,
No, no, this is what I'm saying. So the neighbor stopped right here. The car was stopped. The suspect vehicle pulls up alongside. There was no one, the suspect vehicle was in the, number 3 lane, correct? There's a number 2 lane.
Yeah.
There was number 3 lane. Suspect vehicle pulls up ahead of the BMW, which you stopped, also blocked in by a car. So there was no way possible, you let a gun out the window right here at an angle. We're right here pulling right up, boom, boom, you're gonna hit your target. You're not gonna hit this, you're not gonna hit with the glasses, what it says.
No way possible, he was great.
He was not grazed. There was a glass fragment. Glass from his from the windshield was cut in the head.
So obviously there's one person you guys, well, I don't want to say failed to question, but it's somebody y'all might be leaving out, and we all think know who needs to be interviewed. Is Suge Knight.
Like I said before, this was the perfect crime. This was the perfect crime. And you know what? Like I said, and I'm trying to, in a sense, I'm trying to reach out to Reggie. And this is, you know, I'm probably the only one at the end of the day that can help you out, and believe it or not. But I'm even willing at this point in time to put up my own money, $100,000. You say you had nothing to do with the Tupac shooting, Christopher Wallace shooting. You take a polygraph. I'll set you up with a place, you take a polygraph. And if you had nothing to do with it, my God, it'll be on the 6 o'clock news. I will give you $100,000. The world knows I will give you $100,000 of my own money. I was a bodyguard, different celebrities, entertainers, different people.
Can you name a few?
Dr. Dre, Daz and Corrupt, Dog Pound, Nate Dogg, Nathaniel Hale, Snoop, of course. I started protecting Tupac Shakur in October '95 when he was released, the day he was released from prison. I was the original bodyguard for Tupac. I was Los Angeles County jail booking in a burglary suspect. I went to work that day. I had arrested someone early on that day, a burglary suspect. During the apprehension of the arrest, the suspect was injured. So I had to transport him to Los Angeles County General Hospital. And anytime you book in a suspect that's injured, there has to be medical clearance. And that's where I was down there. A girlfriend of mine called me at about 12:30 in the morning because she had heard originally all the different reports. His bodyguard was in the car, an ex-girlfriend of mine. And I received a call from Reggie about 11:15 at night. I mean, he was just, you know, a tape was worth $1 million. If I'd had the tape, just cursing me out about how I should have got on the plane and this and that. And, you know, Suge's upset, all these people down here. And, you know, it's only Frank with Tupac. And so I said to him, I said, well, you have all these cops over here at 662. Why don't you have the cops over there with him? And Reggie was, I could tell, I know Reggie well enough, and you know I know you well enough, that he was agitated or something in his voice. As I said, it's about 15 minutes before. And so, lo and behold, obviously this incident occurs. And my statement to him is, why would you just have Frank with him when you got all these other cops? You just don't know. And one thing I knew, I mean, obviously this whole thing was starting to fall apart. And like I said, at one point or another, Reggie and I were like brothers. Okay, at one point or another, there's nothing I wouldn't do for Reggie. And I think vice versa at one time. But Reggie always told me he was so far in now, there's no way to turn it around. I mean, obviously, I knew what he meant. You know.
I understand.
And, you know, even today as I'm sitting here, I mean, Reggie knows how to get a hold of me. And I'm probably only the last person at this point in time that could save him. And I say that with everything. I say that with everything I have. I'm probably the only last person today that could, 15 minutes before.
15 minutes prior, was he panicked?
Yes, he was. He was nervous. He was, I have never seen, I've been on a street situation when we were police officers with Reggie. I mean, looking for armed suspects. I mean, and he's never been this nervous before.
Okay, that's deep. So, did you know at that time that they weren't allowed to carry guns? Or did you find out the following day?
No, at that time when I spoke to Reggie, no.
Okay.
I mean, I found out several hours later from another officer, LAPD officer is no longer with us, Rich McCulley, that, you know, something was up, because Frank told him, he told him everybody, they're not supposed to carry guns. 3 months prior to that, in June of 96, myself, Tupac, Suge, Reggie, and a couple of homeboys, we were there in Vegas for the fights. Tupac rode me the whole time. When he was with me, I always made him wear a bulletproof vest. He always knew when he was with me, he had to wear the vest. He always knew I had 2 guns on me. So God forbid something happens to me, you know, you do what you gotta do at that point in time. He always knew that. We rode around the city, I mean, convertible, no problem, this and that. Reggie and I rode around together a couple of times. And, you know, it was just in a sense, you start getting a funny feeling. I mean, here was 3 years before, it's just us down here. And then about a week or 2 weeks before he was shot, the incident up in Hollywood, and I was out there by myself and all the sheriffs rolled up. You know, so when you think, this is their number 1 artist, I mean, he's as high profile as they get. You know, and you're paying for all the security. I mean, you got all these guys at the club. Something's wrong. The piece of this whole situation, it just doesn't fit. But I think at the end of the day, ultimately, Reggie is and will be the fall guy at the end of the day.
Did you see Tupac that day?
Yeah, I went up to the floor and saw him.
Tell me a little bit about that visit.
I actually started crying. I mean, I liked the kid. I mean, I knew reality. I mean, he was no type of gang member. I mean, obviously, this is about money. This was album sales. Okay, but I knew at the end of the day, I always saw a different side of him. Because I knew from day one, when I picked him up, I mean, the first place we went to, we got out of LAX, myself, Tupac, Titus Himes came with him, Psych, and another guy by the name of Bogart. I mean, first place we went to was he loved El Pollo Loco chicken. El Pollo Loco at Sentinel and La Tierra. That was our first stop, El Pollo Loco chicken. And the limousine pulled up there. And I always knew, I mean, it was just, in a sense, you know, it was all this hype, but, you know, he was just like, you know, the rest of us. I mean, he had feelings. I mean, he was soft-hearted, but of course, when he got around Shook, you know, he had to play the part. You know, he was all up and down. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, the situation is what it is now.
So when you saw him, did he look at you?
Shook?
No, Tupac.
No, when I was in the hospital, his eyes, you could tell he was sedated. So, I mean, obviously his pupils were open, but there was no movement there. But, I mean, he was sedated. I did work undercover for the FBI and ATF during my tenure with Death Row Records and Right Way Protective Services.
When you got with Right Way, were you already undercover?
No, I was not. I was approached by the FBI and ATF about a year afterwards, while I was working with Death Row Records in regards to racketeering within Death Row Records, and also at that time, the mayor of Compton, Omar Bradley, some other things that occurred within the city. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that the FBI at that time was following Reggie, Suge, the homeboys. Obviously, I was showing pictures and everything, and that's how things started out with the FBI in Nevada at that time. Being the case was so messed up. I mean, there were so many players, and obviously, with any homicide investigation, any law enforcement agency, I mean, here you had a case where Suge Knight has a reputation. His head of security is a ex-Compton police officer. It's suspected that you have Compton gang members who came up there to do a shooting, gangland-style shooting, and yet still, who's heading up the investigation? You have a lieutenant from Compton Police. This whole thing, it smells from high hell. Within a matter of a day after Tupac was shot, you know, guys are getting killed left and right. The first guy that was killed, ex-friend of mine, Larry Finch, was a Compton school police officer. His brother Bobby was the first one killed. Bobby's a hell of a nice guy. He did a lot of personal protection for stars at one time. I mean, whatever he may have done in the past, I mean, hell, everybody's got past. Okay, but you know, you do what a person's doing today. He's a nice guy. I mean, he's the type of guy, he'd give you a shirt off his back, okay? I mean, he was ran up on, killed point blank on his front lawn. Bottom line, that was the first one. You know, so obviously from a law enforcement agency looking into this, I mean, all of a sudden there's war in Compton. I mean, you know, basic calls are made, you know. So, quote unquote, you know, alleged Crip members, whatever, were killed left and right. But from Las Vegas standpoint, I mean, the whole thing smells. You got search warrants all of a sudden coming about this and they're doing this and that. People are taking into custody. There's murders left and right. But you got two pieces right there. You got a police department. You got one ex-cop who's a right-hand man. And his daddy is still the one heading up the investigation. It's a conflict all the way around. I'm thinking immediately, these sons of bitches let them up. Wholeheartedly. Honest to God, and that's just a cop's intuition, okay? And being a police officer, detective, whatever you want to call it, crime just solved by bullshit experience, okay? And that was 100% experience right there. I know them something guilty. I know it. If Tupac was alive right now, what would he say? I think he would probably say, Hacky, what's the cap in there?
That bodyguard that was pulled off is prime to the investigation. Not only the reasons for them being pulled off, but what led up to their being pulled off and what information days prior they were privy to. You don't discount that information.
Even in a military assassination, is the fact that let's take out communications. The same is true in an assassination and in the elimination of a single person. Let's make sure that they can't call for help. Let's make sure that they can't communicate with each other. If they're in trouble, why would we want them to be able to tell anyone what's actually going on?
Communicate. We're in an instant communication era. And for a detective to ignore the possibility is, in my mind, ridiculous.
George Kalisis called the meeting at the behest of Reggie Wright Jr. All of the bodyguards were there.
Never before had we had a meeting at an attorney's office or with an attorney even present.
Reggie Wright told us not to carry any weapons. Never have they told me to leave my weapons, either in my room or my car.
So they were asking us to guard Pac and Suge and everyone else completely unarmed. We had never been told to leave our weapons.
For an attorney to do that, I don't know why.
We had a meeting at Club 662, a security meeting, because for security we had on any given weekend that we were going to be in Las Vegas with all of the artists and when they were going to be performing or we were going to be at a fight, there would be 23 security members from Right Way Security.
So now I'm in a situation where I'm being asked to guard Pac without any weapons or a phone.
If you're going to be an easier target for me, if you're my intended victim and you carry a gun, I have to plan completely differently than if you did not. So if I can get you to be unaware of the danger, if I can get you not to carry the gun or have any personnel with you that are armed, you're that much of an easier victim and an easier hit. That's a great part of the plan if you could accomplish that, to get rid of any firearms, because as the hitter, as the shooter, as the planner, you're protecting yourself.
It was a special meeting. He was called in to be at his office on a Saturday to meet with all of us.
Why would I leave my weapons in a vehicle or in the hotel room and I'm personally guarding Pac in one of the most hottest places to be? And what that's going to make it is a bodyguarding incident where you would be, only thing you would have on you is your person.
And Michael Moore made the biggest hoorah about the weapons.
I informed Reggie that I wasn't taking my weapon off for no. My gun did not belong to Right Way. It was my personal gun, and I was going to carry it, and that's what I did.
We get to the MGM, again, he goes to a crap table, and the MGM was a little bit, more crowded that evening while he was gambling. He was gambling, he was winning, he was doing good, and Pac said to me, go over, call Reggie, and find out what time Suge wants to meet to go into the fight.
Tupac asked me to go make the call. I didn't have a radio. I couldn't contact Reggie, so I had to go to a landline phone. So I go to call. As I went to call on a landline phone, I came back to the table, and they were all gone.
During our conversation on the way back from the MGM Grand, I explained to Tupac that Mr. Wright was taking me off of him earlier that day. And I walked him all the way to his room.
So I'm walking all over the MGM looking for him before I could even realize he isn't even in the building.
I explained he's a real impatient person. I walked him to his room, and my understanding was he was supposed to wait there till other security got to him.
I get back over to the Lexor, and I'm looking all around for him. I'm on his phone, calling, trying to find him, and Pop walked behind me. I'm like, Pop, where you been, man? I'm looking all over for you guys over at the MGM. He's like, oh, we walked back over here. I was ready to go.
So I went to my room, and that was actually the last. I didn't have no knowledge he was downstairs in the lobby until Frank Alexander called me and said, hey, Mike, why is Tupac down here? And I didn't even leave on the phone. I explained to Frank, even then, I am not on Tupac. I kept trying to say that the only person that was assigned to Tupac at that time was Frank Alexander. We had an issue with our clothes. Me and Frank had on short pants that day. We needed to change our clothes to get into the right thing, the right clothes for the fight. But there were some problems there because with me not really being on Tupac, the person who really needed to change his clothes was Frank.
So I called Michael Moore on the house phone and said, hey, get back down here because Pac is, getting ready to want to, take off and everything, and he's upset about Reggie. Have you talked to Reggie?
So we let Frank go change his clothes while I waited. Then Frank changed his clothes, came back and picked up on Pac, and then I went back to my room. To this day, I believe that Tupac was under the impression that I was going to be going to the MGM Grand with him. But that wasn't the case. When I went to my room, I knew in my heart I wasn't coming back because I had been instructed to go to Club 662, and that's what I did. He got a little upset because now that I think back on it, he said he's paying for this shit and that he is telling us where we're going. I remember him saying that real loud that day in the lobby, that I'm paying for you, you go where I say go. And then I said, Frank, you need to make a phone call to Reggie. I remember him saying that real loud that day in the lobby, that I'm paying for you, you go where I say go. And then I said, Frank, you need to make a phone call to Reggie.
And Pac said, Michael, come over to the MGM and meet us over there.
Tupac even called Reggie and had Frank get in touch with Reggie to find out where Michael Moore was at. So the problem was festering, and I knew something wasn't right. So when I went to my hotel room, I told Tim Williams, something is not right here, Tim. What we have to do is find out what's going on. So I said, let me go downstairs, and I'll change clothes, and I'll work with Tupac until Reggie says something. Tim said, Mike, don't do it. He goes, you're going to piss Reggie off, don't do it. I go, Tim, Frank's going to need some help. He said, don't do it. Just get dressed and go to the club. I think Frank had no idea that I received them 4 phone calls prior to Tupac getting killed.
Yeah, I'm out at the arena right there waiting to go in. I had the regular security escort us behind the line. Regular security escort us behind the line.
3 of the phone calls came from Mr. Wright, and 1 phone call came from Al Giddens, who was also head of 662 security. And I asked him, I go, Al, why are you calling my room at 10 after 8 if I'm not supposed to be there at 10? And his answer was, Reggie just called me and told me to call you. I said, well, don't call me no more. And then after that, all my phone calls came directly from Mr. Wright.
People saw Pac, they were, Tupac, that's Tupac, and we're waiting for Michael Moore to show up. At that point in time, I had lost all communication with Michael Moore. I didn't know whether he was coming, what was going on, or anything.
I think there was a reason for that. And I think the reason was making sure that no one carried a weapon.
Pac was real antsy. He was like, where's Suge? Where comes Suge here? He's looking at the time and stuff, and it's getting closer for the fight to start at this point. People are going in.
Well, we got down to the MGM, right in the front of it, right where the fight was at, And I was getting ready to get out of the car. I rode with Tim Williams over there. He goes, Mike, what are you doing? I said, Tim, I should just get out. Because if Reggie yells at me and I'm covering Tupac, how bad can that be? Well, at the last second, I decided to just stay in the car. I went to Club 662.
Suge got there with a couple of people that was with him, whoever it was that had the tickets, and we went in to the fight right as the national anthem was playing.
But I'll tell you what, this happens all the time in the Middle East, and this is typical of your assassinations in Colombia, your assassinations in some other countries, to where the car targeted is blocked in from going left because the other car that pulls up to the right completes the quadrant, completes the silhouette of blocking the middle car in. There's no place for the middle car to go. The middle car is blocked in by the lead car, is blocked in by the car to the left, and is finally blocked in by the right car, which appears to be the shooter in this incident.
While I was working at 662, I heard something over the Nextels that we all carry for security. And what I heard was,
No, that's news to me. The only phones I know of, I think, are all through AT&T.
These radios that we keep talking about, the Nextel telephones, two-way radios, they had pretty much just come into play. Because originally, all we had were the, regular radios, just the radio itself. And probably closer to around the time of us coming out to Las Vegas, around the time frame of Pac being killed, I would say that those Nextel phone radios had just come into play for right-way security. There was only, it's a guess, there was probably only 4 or 5 of them. Okay, but it was enough to go around to the people that mattered that should have had them.
The Nextel information is news.
The Voice was definitely one of our security that works directly for Mr. Knight.
Michael Moore, the night that Tupac was shot, after being taken off of Tupac with me, went back over to Club 662.
Maybe the police should have concentrated more on Death Row, the Nextel phone bills, and other things that could have helped them investigate it more in depth. I would definitely look more at Death Row than I would look at Mr. Anderson, and that's from what I've gathered when I was at New York, what I heard Pac tell Suge Knight, and what I heard over that radio that night after the shots were fired.
They got word that Tupac and Suge had been shot. So Michael was with Reggie, and they went to the hospital together. And Michael talks about hearing something over the radio. Well, he would have heard it over Reggie's radio because he wouldn't have had a radio that night.
Right before me and Mr. Wright got in the vehicle to go get to the hospital, someone else came on the radio and said, hey, don't say nothing over the radio.
That communication, however obtained, either through search warrant or otherwise, needs to be gathered, because how can you tell a conspiracy if you don't have the conspirators and you don't have the communication between the people that are actually running the conspiracy?
You've got to know a timeline of the individual who is your target. You've got to know where they're at, where they're going to be, who they're going to be surrounded by. And the second thing is, following that timeline, knowing when there is, you're going to have to plan according to that.
Mr. Wright and I were talking about what had happened, and I just clearly heard somebody say, don't say that over the radio. But the person who said it was not Homeboy Security, nor was it one of our security guards. It was, to me, it would be like a stranger. Someone, and the person that said that was Caucasian, definitely not African American.
Rapper was in the backseat of a black BMW, part of an informal convoy of 10 cars, when Las Vegas police say shots were fired from a passing white Cadillac.
We've been informed that doctors have told the family members that they expect the rap star to once again recover from his injury.
But there was a connection between Keffe D's Southside Compton Crips and Bad Boy Records. A witness testified that Keffe D and his nephew Orlando Anderson were in charge of the relationship between the Southside Compton Crips and Bad Boy Records, and that Bad Boy Records feared Suge Knight. Death Row was associated with the Bloods. Another Bad Boy Records connection, a witness testified that Eric Zip Martin gave Keffe D the gun the night that Tupac was shot. Zip knew Sean Puffy Combs. Suge Knight's former head of security, Reggie Wright, testified that Suge Knight and Sean Puffy Combs were once on good terms, but things changed in 1995. Wright said Suge Knight believed that Combs was responsible for the death of one of his friends. He then told the grand jury about how Tupac Shakur talked about having sex with the Notorious B.I.G.'s wife in a song and rapped about killing members of Bad Boy Records. Wright said the feud escalated, with a member of Bad Boy Records pointing a gun at Tupac Shakur at an awards show months before that shooting in Las Vegas. Wright said Keefe D was at that awards show with members of Bad Boy Records. That, coupled with the theft of the Death Row chain and then the MGM Grand fight, caused things to come to a head that night in September of 1996 in Las Vegas. Prosecutors say it ended with the murder of Tupac.
LAPD detective says he has solved the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur, who was gunned down in Las Vegas nearly 20 years ago. Detective Greg Kading says he has proof it was Sean Diddy Combs who orchestrated the murder. His book on the investigation has now been turned into a documentary.
That was Tupac. That was Tupac. No, he got shot. No, he got shot. Who besides yourself down there knows, for one, knows about these guys killing Tupac? Pretty sure everybody around him knew about it.
In a taped confession never before shown on film.
Which of those four is it when you talk to him about murdering Tupac?
Man, we wiped it out quick. You know, it's nothing. We were on a million.
Greg Kading joins us now from Los Angeles. Greg, it's good to see you. I want to mention that you wrote a book about this in 2011 called Murder Rap, and that's what's the basis now of this documentary. Let's start from the beginning. You say that Sean, back then known as Puff Daddy Combs, shelled out $1 million to gun down Tupac Shakur. Why?
Well, that was the agreement that was made between Mr. Combs and a gang member here in Los Angeles who was doing some security work. Him and his gang crew were doing security work for Bad Boy. And there was an ongoing conflict going on between Combs and Suge Knight and the two record labels, the infamous East Coast, West Coast rap wars. And the conflict just continued to exacerbate. People were getting shot. There were armed confrontations. And then it culminated in a situation where Sean Combs knew that he was being hunted down by Suge Knight out here in Los Angeles. So he solicits the help of these Southside Crip gang members, in particular a guy named
Doctors will later estimate that Biggie died shortly after being shot. In just 6 months, the music world has lost 2 of its biggest stars to murder, leaving fans to wonder who shot Tupac and Biggie. It's a question the LAPD will ask Greg Kading and a federal task force to answer nearly a decade later. In the 1990s, Suge Knight and his LA-based record label, Death Row Records, found themselves at the center of the infamous East Coast-West Coast rivalry, pitted against Sean Puffy Combs and his New York-based Bad Boy Records. This showdown between Suge Knight and Puffy Combs would culminate in the murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, 2 of the most famous rap artists in the world. There were several key moments that led up to that deadly conclusion. First, in November of 1994, before Tupac was signed to Death Row Records, he was beaten and shot during a robbery at a New York recording studio. By coincidence, Puffy and Biggie were in the same building when the robbery went down, leading Tupac to conclude that his former friends had set him up.
Tupac would eventually find out that Biggie and Puffy didn't have anything to do with setting him up at the Quad Studio. However, by that time, the damage was done. The day after Tupac is shot at the Quad Studios, he's required to show up at the local courthouse because he's facing sexual assault charges from the year before. He ends up getting convicted and then sentenced to prison.
9 months later, in August of 1995, Suge Knight attends the Source Awards in New York City, Puffy's turf. This is Combs on stage, with Puffy sitting in the audience.
Any artist out there want to be an artist or want to stay a star, don't have to worry about the data producers trying to see all in the videos, all on the records. Then come to Death Row.
A few weeks later, September of 1995, Suge Knight and Puffy Combs wind up at the same nightclub in Atlanta, where confrontation breaks out between their 2 entourages. As Suge is trying to leave, his close friend and bodyguard, Jake Robles, is shot and ultimately dies. Suge blames the shooting on Puffy and his bodyguard, Anthony Wolf Jones. Meanwhile, Tupac has been languishing away in prison for months, unable to come up with the money to post bail while his case is appealed.
This prison, Clinton Correctional Center, was not Club Med. This was for badass convicted felons. And there were rumors that Tupac had actually been raped in prison, and he denied it. But he wanted out of there in a big way. His attorney was appealing it, but appeals take forever. And Suge Knight approached him.
Suge Knight recognizes this business opportunity. He approaches Tupac Shakur, and they cut a deal for him to do 3 records for Death Row in exchange for getting him out of prison on bail.
A lot of people thought that Tupac sold his soul to Death Row Records and to Suge Knight. And Tupac was with a guy who handled business differently than, say, people like Sean Combs. And that is where the thug image really came to be, was when he hooked up with Suge Knight and Death Row Records.
At a Christmas party in December of 1995, an associate of Puffy's named Mark Anthony Bell claims he was taken upstairs and beaten by Suge Knight, Tupac, and other members from Death Row.
According to Mark Anthony Bell's statement to the LAPD and the FBI, Suge Knight was trying to find the whereabouts of Puffy Combs' family residence in Los Angeles. As a result of this incident, it's clear now that Suge Knight is going directly after Puffy.
After signing with Death Row Records in LA, Tupac ramped up the rivalry through his music. Biggie had already released a track called Who Shot Ya, which was widely interpreted as taunting the shooting of Tupac in New York. In retaliation, Tupac released Hit 'Em Up, one of the most infamous diss tracks in rap history, where he bragged about sleeping with Biggie's wife and threatened to kill members of Bad Boy Records.
You claim to be a player, but I fucked your wife. Any you niggas from New York that wanna bring it, bring it. But we ain't singing, we bringing drama. Fuck you and your motherfucking mama. We gon' kill all you motherfuckers. Fuck Biggie, fuck Bad Boy as a staff, record label, and as a motherfucking crew. And if you wanna be down with Bad Boy, then fuck you too. Die slow, motherfucker. My phone make sure all y'all kids don't grow. You motherfuckers can't.
In July of 1996, 7 months after the alleged beating of Puffy's friend in Los Angeles, a group of Southside Crip gang members encounter a group of rivals, the Mob Piru Bloods, at a mall south of LA. The Mob Piru Bloods were associated with Suge Knight, and in their group at the mall is a guy named Trayvon Lane, a close friend of Suge's, and he's wearing a death row necklace that Suge Knight only gave out to his inner circle of friends. One of the Southside Crips, a guy named Orlando Anderson, sees this coveted medallion around Trayvon's neck and steals it.
According to at least one confidential informant, Puffy was offering $5,000 to any Crip that could bring him a death row medallion.
September 7th, 1996, the day of Tupac Shakur's murder. Tupac and Suge Knight are attending a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Nevada. Tupac has just recorded a new song for Tyson called Let's Get It On, which is played as Iron Mike enters the ring.
Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight, they're sitting ringside in their $1,000 seats. For Tupac Shakur, it can't get any bigger than this. He's the most prominent rap star in the world. His friends, in the ring fighting to a song that he wrote, and Tupac is the center of attention.
During the fight, an FBI witness reported seeing an altercation between Suge and Tupac's entourage and some rival Crip gang members. One of the Crips told Suge Knight that he thought he was untouchable, to which Knight responded that he was untouchable. The Crip responded, "You can be touched." As Suge and Tupac's entourage are leaving the arena after the fight, they're walking through the MGM Grand when they encounter Orlando Anderson, the Crip who had stolen Trayvon Lane's death row medallion a couple of months earlier. Trayvon Lane just happens to be with Tupac when they spot Orlando Anderson loitering in the crowd.
But Trayvon Lane whispers something into Tupac's ear, and immediately Tupac runs over and attacks Orlando Anderson. The rest of the entourage jump on. It's now just a big gang assault. Unbeknownst to them, the whole thing is being videotaped on MGM surveillance cameras. As the security starts to intervene, they all hightail it out of there. Now you have the most famous rapper in the world, who's all pumped up with the fact he just got into a fist fight, he just watched his friend Mike Tyson knock somebody out, and he's speedily trying to get out of the casino. Suge Knight's closely behind him, this hulking 300-pound, 6'5" individual. Tupac, you can tell, is very pumped up. He's hyped out about what had just happened. As he's making his way out of the casino, he's getting the attention of all these people, and they start following in the crowd. He creates somewhat of a human vacuum, and this large crowd begins to follow him out of the casino.
Afterwards, Tupac returns to his hotel, where he meets up with his girlfriend, Kidada Jones, who's the daughter of music producer Quincy Jones and the sister of actress Rashida Jones. Tupac explains what just happened in his fight with Orlando Anderson, that he doesn't want Kidada coming out with them because it's too dangerous, so she decides to stay behind in the hotel. Tupac was not a real gangster, but he's just started a fight with a member of the Southside Crips. It's potentially a fatal mistake.
Tupac and Suge decide to drive together that night in a 750 black BMW, putting the security personnel in separate cars. And anticipation of going to the 662 Club, which is Suge's Las Vegas nightclub, where there's going to be a charity event. Tupac is supposed to perform, and they've got this big night planned ahead of them.
Everybody and their brother knew that he was going to be there. It's advertised on the radio station and everything else, flyers everywhere.
Even Mike Tyson is supposed to make an appearance at the club to watch Tupac perform.
The entourage following Tupac and Suge would consist of at least 6 vehicles. As their caravan is making its way towards the 662 Club on these busy Las Vegas streets, Suge Knight has his music blasting. Tupac is in the passenger seat. They're having a great time, making the best out of the heavy traffic. Suge Knight is ultimately pulled over by Las Vegas police for having his music too loud. During that moment, some girls who were in Vegas for the weekend recognized Suge standing outside of his car. They decided to join the caravan.
Like, and they were, the police were going through a car or something or another, and then the traffic was stopped, and then they got in the car.
Could you see those and shit?
I thought it was Tupac, and then he was like, come go with us, we're going to 662.
As Suge is pulling away, the girls fall in behind him, cutting off his security.
And these guys pulled up and was like, let us in front of you. Lauren said, that's security, you have to let them in front.
The caravan continues down Las Vegas Boulevard until they reach Flamingo, where they turn toward the club.
We were kind of arguing about it because I was like, we're in this big entourage with all these people, and I was like, this isn't really us. We're not entourage or groupie kind of girls.
It's not our scene.
It's not our scene at all.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, we'll go. I know where the club is at. We can
We'll go check it out.
As they reach the intersection of Flamingo and Cobalt, the girls decide to get out of the caravan and go to the club ahead of them. They come to a stop just in front and to the right of Suge's car.
And as soon as we pulled past him, that's when all hell broke loose.
A white, newer model 4-door Cadillac eases up alongside Suge's BMW, just outside of where Tupac is seated.
A male in the back of the Cadillac leans across and discharges a firearm 9 times, hitting Tupac with 4. The girls who are stopped just in front to the right of Suge hear the shots ring out.
I remember it was a white Cadillac. And the Lauren was like, that was Tupac. That was fucking, no, he got shot. No, he got shot.
groupie kind of girls.
It's not our scene.
It's not our scene at all.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, we'll go. I know where the club is at. We'll
go check it out.
As they reach the intersection of Flamingo and Cobalt, the girls decide to get out of the caravan to go to the club ahead of them. They come to a stop just in front and to the right of Suge's car.
And as soon as we pulled past him, that's when all hell broke loose.
A white, newer model 4-door Cadillac eases up alongside Suge's BMW, just outside of where Tupac is seated.
A male in the back of the Cadillac leans across and discharges a firearm 9 times, hitting Tupac with 4. The girls who were stopped just in front to the right of Suge hear the shots ring out.
I remember it was a white Cadillac. And the Lauren was like, that was Tupac. That was fucking, no, he got shot. No, he got shot.
Instinctively, they try to pull away from the situation. As they're doing that, the white Cadillac is also lunging forward. The 2 vehicles almost collide, and both vehicles then make a right onto Cobalt. Frank Alexander, Tupac's bodyguard, jumps out of the vehicle that he is in and runs up to try to render aid. Suge immediately pulls away, does a U-turn, effectively leaving Frank Alexander standing there alone in the middle of the street. As he's leaving the location, he hits a median, blows out a couple of tires, and ultimately comes to a stop down on Las Vegas Boulevard. 2 members of the mob Piru, who are also in that caravan, they attempt to chase down the white Cadillac. Gunfire is exchanged between those 2 cars until the white Cadillac gets away.
Tupac is then transported to a local hospital where he'll fight for his life for the next 6 days. Throughout the week, crowds are showing up at the hospital hoping to hear about Tupac's condition. Some notables include Reverend Al Sharpton, rapper MC Hammer, and Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur.
Also amongst these people is an off-duty Compton school police officer from Los Angeles named Kevin Hackey, who worked for Death Row's Right Way Security. He creates such a scene at the hospital, claiming to be an FBI agent there to investigate the case. He is ultimately escorted out and banned from the location. Hackey would play a major role in several of the big conspiracy theories, with various claims about what he'd seen and what he'd heard. But when he was ultimately asked to testify, he was deemed unreliable, claiming memory loss, and other issues.
On September 13th, 1996, Tupac Amaru Shakur succumbed to his injuries and passed away. People would immediately theorize that Tupac had been shot by Orlando Anderson, the Crip he got into a fight with just 2 hours before he was shot. But with Suge and his friends refusing to cooperate, Las Vegas police couldn't build a case. For Suge Knight, the loss of Tupac is devastating. Not only has he lost yet another close personal friend to murder, he's also lost one of his biggest moneymakers. Adding insult to injury, Suge finds himself with a parole violation for his involvement in the fight with Orlando Anderson and is sent back to prison for the next 5 years. The day after Tupac died, September 14th, 1996, the mob Piru Bloods, who were associated with Suge Knight, meet at a park in Compton called Looters Park. They discuss the murder of Tupac in Vegas and the potential involvement of rival Southside Crip gang members like Orlando Anderson. As a result, the mob Piru Bloods give the green light against the Southside Crips. A gang war has now ensued on the streets of Los Angeles as a result of Tupac Shakur's murder.
Within months after Tupac's death, Biggie Smalls and his junior mafia entourage begin coming back to California to shoot video and to produce his album. Now security is less of a concern. Tupac is dead, Suge Knight is in jail. They get a false sense of security. They don't realize they're coming back to a hornet's nest.
On March 7th of 1997, Biggie and Puffy attend the Soul Train Music Awards in Los Angeles to present the award for Best Female R&B Soul Single. Driving home the volatile atmosphere in LA, they are met with a rowdy mix of cheering and booing and shouts of West Side.
What's up, Cali?
Backstage at this same event, there's a minor confrontation between members of the Bad Boy security detail and members of the Fruit of Islam. Apparently the conversation goes something to the effect of, hey, you're disrespecting the brothers in the East, in reference to Bad Boy Records. Puffy Combs, who's also present, looks over at Mustafa Farrakhan, the son of Luis Farrakhan, and says, hey, we're cool, right? And Mustafa Farrakhan quells the incident.
The following day will be Biggie's last day alive. He has a phone conversation with his mother, Willetta. She expresses concern about his security in Los Angeles, but he comforts her by saying that he has LA cops protecting him. That night, Biggie and Puffy head to a party at the Peterson Auto Museum, put on by Vibe magazine. The party at the Peterson will eventually grow out of control. Twice as many people show up as expected, with only about 10 security guards on site. Plus, there are numerous celebrities there, like Missy Elliott, Vivica Fox, Chris Tucker, the Wayans Brothers, Whitney Houston, NBA stars, and of course, Puffy and Biggie. As all the people who weren't able to get in begin to crowd outside the main entrance, things start to get rowdy. Among them are known gang members. Inside the party, they repeatedly play Biggie's new hit, Hypnotize. Just like Tupac in Vegas, Biggie is on top of the world. At approximately 11 p.m., the on-site fire marshal puts in a call to have the LAPD respond as the crowd is too big and the people stuck outside are getting out of control. Near midnight, the fire marshal finally shuts the party down. After being there for nearly 4 hours, Puffy and Biggie are ready to go anyway. However, it would take them nearly 40 more minutes to get to their vehicles.
911 emergency, I'm trying to get detail next door. We have an inspector on scene there, I guess over with an overcrowding. Wilshire and Fairfax, the Peterson Museum. They got shots fired there. These people have guns and everything.
At approximately 12:05 a.m., witnesses report gunshots fired at the corner of 8th and Orange Grove, which is the southeast corner of the Peterson Auto Museum. They would provide a license plate and a description of a black Ford Bronco fleeing the area.
Many would later believe that this was part of a diversion in the conspiracy to kill Biggie Smalls.
Approximately half an hour later, Biggie and Puffy are finally outside and ready to go. One member of the entourage notices a suspicious person across the parking lot is mad-dogging them, staring them down. While waiting for their vehicles to be brought around, Puffy's bodyguard, Eugene Deal, who would become a key witness in the case, notices another suspicious-looking individual.
I'm in the garage. I come out. She left. She right at the sidewalk with sidewalk. She right there. I turn that corner. He's right there. I see this guy, just like the Nation of Islam. He had a blue suit, white shirt, blue bow tie. Black guy. Black guy.
Just prior to pulling away, Biggie's sitting in the front seat speaking to his friend, Damian Butler, standing just outside the window. They're elated. Damian's bragging, "We're back, Biggie, we're back." Biggie's last words, "We'll see you at the next party." In the entourage were 3 SUVs. In the first one, a green Suburban, Puffy Combs was in the front passenger seat. In the back were 3 bodyguards, including Eugene Deal. The second SUV, another green Suburban, was being driven by Gregory G. Money Young. Biggie was in the front passenger seat. And in the back was his cousin, Little C's, and 2 others. The third and last SUV was a black Chevy Blazer. It was driven by an Inglewood School police officer named Reggie Blaylock. In the passenger seat was bad boy head of security, Paul Alford. As the first SUV with Puffy is pulling away, they're looking over their shoulders, waiting for Biggie to finish loading into his Suburban. Meanwhile, the third SUV is in the street behind Biggie, blocking traffic so he can pull out. As Biggie is ready to go, Puffy's vehicle accelerates northbound to meet the light at Wilshire. Biggie's vehicle is attempting to catch up, and the security team in the third vehicle is jumping into their Blazer. At that moment, a white SUV pulls in front of the third SUV, momentarily cutting off security from Biggie's vehicle in front of them. The driver of the third SUV lunges his vehicle forward, cutting the white SUV out of the caravan. A lot of people would later theorize that the white SUV was involved in the shooting. As this is happening, a dark, newer model Chevy Impala pulls up beside Biggie's vehicle. The driver begins firing into Biggie's door. The shooter was described as an African-American male. He was seen holding a semi-automatic pistol across his body with his left hand on the steering wheel. After firing his weapon, the shooter makes a quick right into Wilshire Boulevard. The security team in the Blazer attempts to give chase, but the Impala gets away. Meanwhile, Biggie's vehicle has come to a stop, and Puffy's vehicle has made a U-turn and rushed back to see what has happened. Puffy runs to Biggie's door and recognizes that Biggie's been shot. He opens the door, but Biggie's unresponsive. It takes the entourage about 5 minutes to get to Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Beverly Hills. At approximately 1:15 a.m., doctors notify Puffy Combs and Faith Evans that Biggie Smalls is dead.
The autopsy report revealed that he had been shot 4 times. The fatal shot had entered his torso and traveled in an upward trajectory, hitting his heart and his lung. Doctors would conclude that Biggie Smalls likely died moments after being shot.
The next morning, the world awakens to the news of Biggie's murder. Conspiracy theories run wild, with people naturally connecting Biggie's murder to Tupac's just 6 months earlier. On March 18th of 1997, a massive funeral was held in New York. Fans lined the streets as a procession traveled through his Brooklyn neighborhood. Puffy would give the eulogy, and Faith Evans would sing. 1 week later, Biggie's Life After Death album is released. It'll be nominated for 3 Grammys and sell over 10 million copies in the United States. Biggie's murder was originally investigated by a detective named Kelly Cooper. However, the case was eventually transferred to a new team of investigators that included a detective named Russell Poole. When they inherited the case, the department was about to be hit by one of the biggest police corruption scandals in LAPD history, in the form of the Rampart scandal. And this was just 5 years after the Rodney King riots. It was in this atmosphere that Russell Poole would develop a theory that dirty LA cops working for Suge Knight had murdered Biggie Smalls. Specifically, this theory pointed a finger at an officer named David Mack and his friend Amir Muhammad. After Poole fails to find support for his theory from the LAPD, he suspects that there's a cover-up.
Eventually, Russell Poole was transferred off of the case, further adding to his suspicions of a massive cover-up. In 1999, he'll resign from the force. However, Russell Poole would collaborate with author Randall Sullivan and help to write the book Labyrinth. He also appeared in the documentary Biggie and Tupac.
Because of these two projects, Poole's theory about dirty cops killing Biggie would become widely accepted by the general public. Based on this theory, Biggie's mother and his estate file a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles.
The wrongful death lawsuit would wind its way through the courts for years. At one pre-trial hearing, a judge indicated that if the LA City were to lose the lawsuit, the damages could be as much as $400 million, which was Biggie Smalls' estimated lifetime earning value. With a $400 million lawsuit looming over their head, they now need to solve this case. On May 1st, 2006, I receive a phone call from Robbery Homicide Division. I'm asked to join a new task force looking into the 9-year-old cold case murder investigation of Christopher Wallace. I spent the vast majority of my career as a gang investigator. I was a court-qualified gang expert. I was assigned to our major narcotics unit. I was a member of a DEA task force where I was cross-designated as a federal agent. I was also a homicide investigator and investigated over 200 cold cases. The majority of my time and the majority of the investigations I was involved in all took place in the South Central region of Los Angeles.
The task force's first job was to get the case files back from Internal Affairs. It was 92 4-inch binders, a massive amount of investigative material, encompassing Russell Poole's investigation, plus all the work done before him, and in the 9 years since.
A lot of good investigative work had been done by these previous detectives. They had composites, they had vehicle descriptions, they had done dozens and dozens of witness interviews. There was a lot to build the case on.
They decided to federalize the case, forming a task force that included agencies like the FBI and the DEA. This kept it from being an LAPD-only investigation, gave them more resources, and allowed them to pursue suspects who were gang-affiliated using federal RICO laws to compel them to talk. They looked into Russell Poole's theory that Officer David Mack and Amir Muhammad had murdered Biggie Smalls. However, his theory would be quickly dismissed. Poole's theory started with rumors that Death Row Records was hiring LA cops as security and was reinforced by 2 major incidents involving LA police officers. The first incident was a shooting that Russell Poole investigated before joining the Biggie murder case. On March 18th of 1997, an off-duty LAPD officer named Kevin Gaines was shot and killed by an undercover LAPD officer after a road rage incident that Gaines had instigated. While investigating the shooting, Russell Poole found out information about Gaines' personal life that seemed to connect him to Suge Knight and Death Row Records. Gaines was dating Suge Knight's estranged wife and was driving her car when he was killed. He also frequented a steakhouse that was a suspected Death Row hangout. This seemed to reinforce the rumors that LA cops were connected to Death Row Records. The other incident that backed this theory was a bank robbery committed by an LAPD cop named David Mack. In December of 1997, Mack was arrested for robbing a bank near the USC campus a month earlier, which had netted him $722,000.
A subsequent search of David Mack's house revealed that he had a makeshift shrine to Tupac Shakur. He also drove a black Chevy Impala. A photograph was found where David Mack is wearing a red crimson suit, indicative of the Bloods game.
So far, this evidence against Mack was circumstantial, but when the task force got to the hard evidence, things started to fall apart.
First, when the FBI raided David Mack's house after the bank robbery, they supposedly found Gecko ammunition. Gecko ammunition was used to kill Biggie Smalls, and and there was an FBI report claiming that this ammunition was very rare. However, the FBI report got it wrong because they only focused on wholesale dealers, of which there were only 2 in the United States. But at the retail level, there were over 24 stores in Southern California that sold this ammunition. Half of them were in the LA area. More importantly, the ammunition seemed to be very popular with gangs in South Central Los Angeles, turning up multiple times in raids on gang members' houses. The next major clue in Russell Poole's theory was the connection to David Mack's alleged accomplice, Amir Muhammad.
Within weeks of Biggie's murder, a jailhouse informant named Michael Psycho Mike Robinson had told police that Biggie's shooter's name was either Kenny, Kiki, Abraham, Ashmir, or Amir.
Abraham. His name is, okay, you told me yesterday the name of Amir. Ashmir or Amir. So Abraham.
While David Mack was in custody, he received a visitor. The individual that signed in on the visitor form used the name Amir Muhammad.
Russell Poole would conclude that this was the same Amir that Robinson had told him about. Amir's non-Muslim name is Harry Billups, and he had used a fake social security number when he signed into the jail's visitor log, which seems suspicious. However, when he was interviewed by the police and the Biggie Estate's attorneys, he had a very simple explanation.
His explanation was that he was aware that inmates and other people would be able to view or access that log, and he didn't want his identity stolen. The book Labyrinth claimed that Amir had also put down a fake home address and an out-of-service telephone number. However, the address on the form matched the one on his driver's license, and there was not even a place on the form for a telephone number, so he hadn't even listed one. We also saw that he had listed his correct driver's license number and his birth date. So if he's trying to hide his identity, why does he use his correct address, his correct driver's license number, and his correct birth date? This hardly sounds like a professional killer.
Next, they went back and looked at Michael Robinson, the informant who had given up the name Amir in the first place.
Labyrinth and the Biggie and Tupac documentary had only told people that Robinson had given the name Amir. What they had failed to mention was that Robinson had given a ton of other information about who this Amir was, but none of that information matched Amir Muhammad, aka Harry Billups.
So he frequents 83rd Street? Yes. In Compton? Yes. Do you know what kind of car this is Amir drives? Like stretch number?
Harry Billups had no gang affiliation, was a college-educated mortgage broker, and lived in San Diego. He was not a Crip bodyguard rolling around in the city of Compton in a stretch white limousine. Robinson also admitted that he was in jail at the time that Biggie Smalls was killed, and that he had gathered his information from other jailhouse informants and from people on the outside. He also admitted that he didn't even know where Biggie had been killed, and that he thought Biggie had been killed with a machine gun. The only thing that Robinson said that matched Harry Billups was the name Amir. Everything else he said was just ignored in order to keep the Poole theory alive. Michael Robinson had also picked Amir Muhammad out of a photo lineup, but he picked 2 other people out as well, so he had circled half his options.
You have to understand something. During the first 3 or 4 days of this case, we were getting phone calls for all kind of inmates who had all the answers to everything. They witnessed all the days in prison. They knew everything.
Now, there was very far-fetched information coming in that Oprah had Tupac killed, Jay-Z had Biggie killed, and Tupac killed Biggie.
I don't care the informers, the inmates, or whatever, they got access to the media. And a big case like this, everybody's watching this. So when my lieutenant get out there and talk about the bullets, the type of car, what the guy looked like, all you doing is telling even everybody in the world, instead of including inmates, hey, this is what we have. So now you have to run over there and interview this inmate who just got the information from the media. So you run in circles. But once you realize what he said is garbage, it's garbage. just let it go. You don't pursue garbage. You're wasting your time.
Based on this limited information, the LA Times had published an article that named Amir Muhammad, aka Harry Billups, as a suspect in the murder of Biggie Smalls. However, 5 months later, they had to print a retraction after the LAPD told them that he was not a suspect, that their story was based on an old theory. Billups tells the LA Times, "I'm not a murderer, I'm a mortgage broker."
Complicating things more, Eugene Deal, Puffy's bodyguard the night that Biggie was shot, identified Harry Billups in a six-pack lineup.
However, Eugene Deal didn't make this identification until 2001. By this time, Billups' name and photo had already been featured in the LA Times twice, making Deal's IDing of him completely tainted.
On top of that, Eugene Deal had been shown a different photograph lineup years earlier and picked out an entirely different individual. The icing on the cake is when the FBI took this informant Michael Robinson down to San Diego to set up an encounter with Harry Billups. Of course, the whole thing went sideways when the informant knocked on the door, and neither did he recognize Harry Billups, nor did Harry Billups recognize him. It just left in this very awkward situation.
You can talk to him. You from LA? You ain't gonna tell me who you're looking for. You need to leave.
So based on the stranger standing on his front porch acting very nervous, Harry Billups himself called the police.
Ultimately, years later, Robinson recanted his statement. The LA Times even ran a story about it, where Robinson and another informant admitted that the information they had given was based on hearsay, that they had contradicted their own stories.
In conclusion, the theory that this mortgage broker was moonlighting as a South Side Crip hitman was beyond nonsense and almost ruined the man's life.
The last of the major cornerstones of Poole's theory was the fact that David Mack owned a black Impala, and they knew that Biggie's killer had driven a dark-colored Impala.
There were two witnesses that identified the Impala as being black, but they were not close-up witnesses. Reggie Blaylock, who was part of the security personnel, was in the trail vehicle, the last vehicle in the caravan. He believed the car was black. And also there was a bus driver who's seen the vehicle fleeing the scene, and he is looking in his rearview mirror. But keep in mind, these are dark at night conditions. However, the witnesses that were in the best position to see the car were adamant that the vehicle was greenish in color, not black. Keep in mind, these are dark at night conditions. However, the witnesses that were in the best position to see the car were adamant that the vehicle was greenish in color, not black.
Could have been dark, I say a dark color. Dark green.
I can't tell the name, but it was just a dark green four-door car. I know it was a four-door.
So the fact that David Mack owned a black Impala was relatively meaningless because it was the wrong color.
It's also important to note that when Mack committed the bank robbery, he and his accomplices used the van stolen from near LAX as their getaway vehicle before Mack switched to his own car to drive home.
Now, if David Mack is not willing to use his own vehicle in the bank robbery, it stands to reason that he's smart enough not to use that same vehicle in the assassination of a celebrity on a crowded street outside of a party with hundreds of witnesses. In the mid-1990s, Chevy Impalas were extremely popular in Los Angeles. In fact, they were so popular that we identified a half a dozen individuals associated with the case that drove Chevy Impalas. DJ Quick's bodyguard had a dark-colored Impala. Suge Knight had a dark-colored Impala. David Mack had a dark-colored Impala. Kevin Hackey had a dark-colored Impala. A Southside Crip by the name of Keefe D that was at the party that night also had a dark-colored Impala. There were Impalas all over the place. The approach our task force was taking was to look at each individual theory as if it could be true. Unfortunately for Russell Poole, his theory was the first one that we were able to disprove.
The next task was to look into the black SUV whose occupants had fired a gun into the air at the southeast corner of the Peterson Auto Museum. Some conspiracy theorists believe that this incident was part of a well-coordinated diversion tactic, even though it happened more than half an hour before Biggie's murder.
As it turns out, it was determined that incident was completely unrelated to the murder of Biggie Smalls. What had actually happened was the occupants of the black Bronco, as they were entering the car, the driver dropped the handgun onto the ground. As he picked it up, he thought it would be a good idea to shoot it into the air to ensure that it was still working. Considering the enormous crowds that were nearby, this obviously created chaos, not to mention several 911 calls from the neighbors. Later on that evening, the same guy in the black Bronco decides that he's going to drive around. Of course, at this time, there's a crime scene investigation related to Biggie's shooting. He wants to know what happened, so as he pulls up, the officer at scene recognizes this black Bronco from the 911 calls and arrests the driver.
He came back to the scene. He had the gun in the car. We took everything, but you're going to kill a big celebrity. And then you're going to leave the scene, come back to the police station, bring the gun with you. I mean, come on. He's not going to prison. He's going to the same place because he's crazy. Let's be real.
So as far as their involvement in a conspiracy, we knew who these guys were. They were arrested, and it was ultimately determined they had nothing to do with anything other than their own stupidity.
There was one more piece of evidence that played a major role in the various Biggie murder theories, and that was the composite sketch of the shooter. There are actually two sketches, both created with input from Biggie's driver, Gregory G. Money Young, and Biggie's cousin, Little C's, who was in the back seat during the shooting. Unfortunately, these two witnesses weren't sure about what they had actually seen.
Well, I wouldn't be no place once you start shooting. Everybody was there and come down. Okay, so when you came back up after ducking down, the car was going, the car was up. Okay?
And then they would say, okay, I know you didn't see anything, but was his nose like this big or was it like that big? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. So did they show you the sketch after it was done? Yeah. Okay. Did that sketch look like the person you saw? No. When they showed me the picture, I was like, if you gave me a color picture of this person right now, I'm giving you what I see. And what I see was not a person's face. If you put it up right here to me, I'll be able to say that's the guy. We judged another one and I was like, man, I'm telling y'all, it's like I see this sketch and that sketch and it's like two different sketches.
They didn't look alike. So now you got two composites of one suspect. If I'm doing a case, I always think ahead. What happened when I go to court? For instance, now if you come up with two composites for two different witnesses, your credibility as far as jury say, they're not sure, you're not sure. If you're not sure, then you can have some problem to get a conviction on the case.
And it bears mentioning that in 1998, both Little C's and G-Money, Gregory Young, were shown a six-pack photo lineup, where one of the photographs in that lineup was of Harry Billups and Amir Mohammed, and neither of them identified Harry Billups as the suspect. The only thing that the witnesses seemed to be sure of was that the guy appeared to look like a Muslim. You even hear this on the 911 call from Biggie's car.
Yo, Joe looked like he was Muslim, kid. He had to even dress like that, man.
Sir, you saw
Eugene Deal to conclude that it must have been the same guy he saw standing at the garage when they were loading up to leave.
I heard Lucy says the guy was dressed like the Nation of Islam. And I said, oh, the kid with the blue suit on, he had a blue suit, white shirt with a blue and green top? He said, yeah. I said, that nigga came directly towards our van. He had a white handkerchief in his hand.
However, Eugene Deal could only speculate because he never saw the shooter behind the wheel.
Could you, from where you were seeing, see who that was in the car?
Couldn't.
Moving forward with their investigation, the task force identified 5 new potential witnesses that they believed had information about the murders of Biggie and Tupac.
One of them was Orlando Anderson, the individual that Tupac had jumped in Las Vegas just before his murder. Unfortunately, though, Anderson had been dead for nearly 8 years.
The next guy on the list was Trayvon Lane, a death row employee who was with Tupac right before he attacked Orlando Anderson. It is widely believed that Tupac's assault on Orlando Anderson was in retaliation for Orlando beating up Trayvon earlier that summer. Unfortunately, the interview with Trayvon went nowhere. He maintained a street code, which meant not cooperating with police.
Next, we interviewed Michael Little Al DeRoe, a Southside Crip and friend of Orlando Anderson's.
On the day that Anderson was killed, he and Michael DeRoe confronted 2 men at a car wash in Compton concerning a debt. The confrontation escalated into a shooting, during which Orlando Anderson and the 2 men were killed. As the sole survivor, Michael DeRoe was convicted for all 3 murders and was now serving a life sentence in Pelican Bay State Prison.
When we interviewed Michael DeRoe in Pelican Bay Prison, he told us that Suge Knight had hired the Southside Crips to kill Biggie Smalls. However, when we started monitoring Michael DeRoe's mail and phone calls from prison, we discovered that he was scheming with his cousin to provide this fake story to the police in hopes that he would be moved out of Pelican Bay into a lesser secure prison.
Another guy on their list of potential witnesses was an alleged Southside Crip named Corey Edwards, who was known to have been in Las Vegas when Tupac was shot, and who was at the next party that Biggie was heading to when he was shot.
Biggie was having an after party after the five party at a mansion in Hollywood, Doheny. And we just went straight up to the mansion.
The task force had trouble finding Edwards because he had been on the run for 5 years after a drug indictment out of Ohio. Through their own efforts, the task force located Edwards and arrested him. Unfortunately, he decided to take his chances with the drug charges rather than cooperate.
The last name on our short list of witnesses was Dwayne Keefe D. Davis.
Keefe D. was a shot caller for the Southside Crips and the uncle of Orlando Anderson. It was determined that Keefe D. had been in Las Vegas along with his nephew, Orlando, the night Tupac was shot. Additionally, Keefe D.'s name had come up in the original Biggie investigation when it was discovered that he was at the party at the Peterson and he had access to a Chevy Impala.
After Tupac was shot, there was rumors on the street that Bad Boy Records owed the Southside Crips $1 million. Some thought the debt was for concert security, while others believed it was for the hit on Tupac. In fact, I believe that when Michael Robinson gave the name Amir and also identified the shooter as Kenny or Kiki, he was meaning to say Keefe as Keefe D and repeating the rumor that the Southside Crips had killed Biggie.
As a result of this $1 million rumor, Keefe D had been interviewed by the Biggie murder investigators back in 1997.
The reason why I asked, we're trying to identify everybody who's there so we can interview, see if we can't find out some more information. Well, you know, tell you the truth, okay? I'm walking up the wrong tree and wasting a lot of taxpayers' money.
11 years later, we still believe that Keefe D was an enormous person of interest who could break the case wide open. Our first run at Keefe failed. He immediately lawyered up, and we realized we needed to find a way to compel him to cooperate. Because the case had been federalized, we became aware that the DEA was already investigating Keefe D and other Southside Crips for interstate narcotics trafficking. We used this information against one of Keefe D's drug couriers in order to convince him to flip against Keefe D. We then used that drug courier to set up Keefe D in a big drug sting involving cocaine and PCP. The operation took months, involved wiretaps, surveillance, and undercover narcotic buys to ensure that we had an ironclad case with a life sentence that we could hold over Keefe D's head. So with this, we went to Keefe's house and confronted him with the evidence that we had built against him. Later that day, Keefe and his attorney met with us at the U.S. Attorney's Office in downtown Los Angeles. Keefe D has a serious dilemma on his hands. He either comes clean about what he knows about the murder of Biggie Smalls, or he goes to prison for the rest of his life. Now, our drug investigation of Keefe D didn't stop with Keefe D. There were several of his close associates. In fact, there were close family members of his who got caught up in this investigation. So Keefe D's decision to cooperate wasn't just to save himself. He was trying to save his family. Keefe agrees to cooperate with the government, and that it will be a proffer session in which nothing that he tells us can be used against him unless we find out that he's deliberately lied to us. At our next meeting with Keefe, we explained to him that we needed to know everything he knew about the murder of Biggie Smalls. Keefe D began by telling us that on the day that Biggie was killed, Puffy had invited him to the vibe party at the Peterson Auto Museum after they had attended a celebrity basketball tournament earlier in the day. So Keefe and some members of his crew attended the party. This claim was backed by Keefe's friend, Corey Edwards.
But you did have some friends that did go to that party.
Yeah, I heard some friends of mine was there.
And who was that?
Like I said, I heard Keith and Lynn at the party.
Keefe D.
While inside the party, Keefe said that he had approached Biggie and Puffy's table.
Did you see Biggie there or Puffy there? Did you know Puffy was this? Yeah, I know. Okay. Did you see them party? Yeah, Did you talk to Little C? What did you guys talk about? I mean, you met before, right? You said, all you doing is,
Little C's confirmed that he had seen Keefe D and several of the other Southside Crips at the Peterson. He sees them walking up towards Biggie when the security intervenes, but Biggie waves them off saying, hey, I know these guys, they're cool. Specifically Keefe D, let him through.
Where did these guys from Compton approach you and ask you for? Did you want to provide?
So I want security at that place.
At the party?
Yeah.
At the museum?
Yeah.
Okay. Did he approach Big?
Yeah.
Did you talk to him? About what?
He didn't talk to him. He came to set us up.
Oh, yeah?
Because he walked over there with me when he did it.
What was the big response?
So what's up? My hands. So what's up?
Puffy's bodyguard, Eugene Deal, had also confirmed that the guys who he referred to as the guys from Compton had approached them at the party.
We sitting around the party. The guy in Compton was telling that they come over.
What they say, did they come over and speak to you guys, or speak to Puffy and
Not speak to him, just like, what's up, what's happening? Y'all want some? Nah, like say y'all want some bottle, like nah, I man, cool, like that.
This, among other things, establishes what Keefe D is already telling us, is that he knows these guys on a personal level and can approach them at any time. Keefe offers Combs extra security at that point, but Combs rejects, telling Keefe, hey, the feds are all over me, obviously not wanting to be seen publicly with these gang members.
He said the FBI is all over me, man. I don't want you guys catching my heat. Stay away from me. That shit, Sean. Oh, yeah. Combs said the FBI is all over me? Yeah.
Keefe D warns Puffy about the presence of death row personnel and blood gang members at the party.
Keefe D's instincts are telling him that something's about to go down. And a short time later, Biggie is killed while driving away from the party.
At this point in the conversation, Keefe D looks squarely at us and says, that wasn't us. He knows that we think that he's potentially involved in the Biggie Smalls murder. So when he says that wasn't us, it begs the question, well then what was?
When Keefe D said that wasn't us, he added to it. But what I do have to tell you is gonna blow your fucking minds.
At this point, we concluded that Keefe D's big bargaining chip was Tupac, not Biggie. People had always suspected that the murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls were connected, but now we were certain of it. With Keefe D's confession, we knew that if we could solve one murder, we would likely be able to solve the other.
In their next meeting with Keefe D, he would be forced to tell them exactly what he knew about the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Keefe, today what we're going to do, we're just going to go over with a fine-tooth comb the Las Vegas incidents. We're going to draft up our report as regarding that specific thing, and then we're going to cover a few other things. But we do have to emphasize to you that everything in this report has to be right on, because if down the road it's determined that some of these details are incorrect, then everything's off the table. So everything in this report cannot be like that report.
Hey, I want to say this though too. I feel like I said that day, don't bullshit me and I won't bullshit y'all. You know what I'm saying?
What this ultimately comes down to is how valuable your life is, your family. And when I say your family, I don't mean your extended family. I mean your brothers, your sisters, your wife, and your kids. That's it.
All right. Man, but I feel I can still go to jail with that, dude. Because this is federal.
What is said right here cannot be used against you, Keefe. We also knew that we had to reconcile what Keefe D was telling us now with what he had told the FBI a decade earlier.
Back then, Keefe claimed that after his nephew, Orlando Anderson, was stomped down by Tupac and his entourage, that he had warned Orlando not to retaliate and to just let it go. He had also told the FBI that he believed Suge Knight had killed Tupac because Tupac was planning on leaving Death Row Records. That had been a popular conspiracy theory for years.
There's some people who claim that Orlando Anderson was a pawn of Suge Knight. That he was planted there in the MGM brand to get beat down, and Suge Knight used him pretty much.
I think it was in Russell Poole, or Labyrinth, or one of those. It's ridiculous also. If he wanted Tupac killed, he could have had him killed. He's surely not going to sit next to that car and say, all right, come up beside my car and shoot 9 times in it, hope you don't hit me, and I'm sitting right next to him.
We could have had him killed anywhere. That we were that smart to have something like that calculated or planned to happen on Vegas Strip after spending $100,000 when you're trying to get a $2 million venture off the ground that Suge had just invested into Club 662. And you know this is one of the most important nights because this is going to be the night that they're going to say yeah or no to if you're going to get a permit or not. Also, everybody forget, if you need to control Tupac, what do people do? What do the government do when they want to control you? They do 2 things. They break you, they institutionalize you. We still had the attorney, David Kenner, hailing his appeal, his freedom. But you sure could have made him lose that appeal. He wanted to take all his money, break him down, and you didn't see where he's at 2 or 3 years later after he finished his tale that he had still right.
When confronted with the fact that he had originally denied having any involvement in the Tupac murder, Keefe D said in his words that that was all bullshit. Well, what about that whole bullshit about Tupac?
You say?
The whole...
Oh yeah, that was bullshit.
Next, Keefe D began to fill in the backstory of his association with Puffy Combs. He told us that he had met Puffy in 1993 through a mutual friend, a guy named Eric Zip Martin, who was a New York-based drug dealer. Where does introduce you to Zip at?
We had a baseball game.
So is it like a high school field? Like a
No, not far. South Park.
So, okay.
We used to play the cases of champagne.
Do you know what brought Zip out here? Because he's originally from New York.
Yeah.
What was he out here for?
He just come out and party and have fun. You know, when he come to LA, he come to NLP. We go party.
When you're out in New York, is that when you meet Puff out there?
Not doing that. I met him, he came to party at the little club down in Santa Monica. Paradise.
On the 24th, Paradise 24, you still
Yeah, it was Paradise, yeah. Santa Monica. Okay. Rhode Island. That's where I met. First day I met Puff.
And Zip introduced you to this my boy. What do you introduce him as? This is my friend, this is my nephew.
That's my boy.
This is my boy.
part on the video.
Which car was that?
The 64 Chevy. What color was it? Brown. Or Usher video. Puff was driving the car. Usher first on every Laker uniform. He had the little kid dancing on my car when he got back. It was fucked up. He paid. Get it repaid. Sometimes we're ready for a beat cut. Think about 3-4 times.
3-4 times, always like a social event.
Yeah. Greenbacks was mostly that's where we started.
Green hats.
Greenback. It's on Sunset. On the left.
Oh. So Puff calls Zip's phone. Zip gives you the phone.
Hey man, you think it's cool to come out there? I'm like, yeah, it's cool, man. You know, just give us like 40, 45, 50 tickets.
So you need no money, no security, nothing like that, just tickets.
He gave us some tickets and I brought the crew. You know, just, yeah.
For his part, Puffy Combs denies having any association with Keefe D or hiring Crips as his security. However, a slew of witnesses confirmed that Puffy Combs and Zip and the Southside Crips were all connected.
Puff had a friend. It was just like somebody that's cool with him and everything like that. And he had a bunch of friends that was Crips and everything. So when I went up, you remember what this friend's name is? You know Zip, Paramount. Okay.
Keefe D's childhood friend and fellow Southside Crip, Terrence Brown, also confirmed that Puffy, Zip, and Keefe D all knew each other quite well.
Like Keith and Puffy through Zip. But everybody knows Zip's from New York when he comes around. So then when this shit happened, oh, he's friend from New York. You know what I'm saying?
Corey Edwards, another Southside Crip friend of Keefe's, also confirmed these connections.
Zip's from New York. He might be involved in the music industry, or
Well, I know you know Puffy and all that.
he does know Puffy. I mean, he knows Biggie,
Yeah, you know Mike Tyson, them, you know.
and Keefe D knows Zip also.
Yeah.
Death Row insider Henry Hen Dog Smith also told police that he had heard that Bad Boy used Southside Crips as security and that Keefe D was the main contact between Bad Boy Records and the Crips.
You think they tried to hire whoever the enemy of Suge?
Exactly. I think that these guys probably went to Puffy them and said that they can really, they can take care of the situation.
I knew that they were Southside Crips, were affiliated or supplying security services, homeboy security services for the Bad Boy crew when they came inside. You know, they see things coming from a street perspective where they won't need it. Also, they, you know, me as a cop, I'm not gonna go and approach a young lady and say, hey, Tupac or Suge wanna holler at you. Well, they'll go do that. I'm not gonna go and walk up to a guy and say, hey, you got some weed on you. Well, they'll go do that.
Even Biggie's cousin, Little Cease, admitted to seeing Keefe D backstage at a Bad Boy concert in Anaheim, along with Puffy's friend from New York, who we now believe was Zip. In fact, that's how Little Cease recognized Keefe D at the Vibe party, because he'd seen him before at the concert in Anaheim.
Did he miss your name or he just, how do you know you were dead?
We saw about this last show. Last show we did out here. Like they was backstage, like show. We did a show at the Anaheim Coliseum.
Not only did Little C say that this Crip was the same person that he had seen backstage at Bad Boy concerts, but he was able to pick him out of a photo lineup.
How do you guys look?
Well, I saw one of them that picture you gave.
Well, let's get that picture back out then.
You saw one of those guys here?
Yeah.
In the picture? Okay, you saw that guy at number 2 there, huh? So you saw that guy when you was on the Josie tour? Same guy?
Same guy. Same dude. Right there. Yep. I saw him that night. I know that face. Saw him twice.
That face is Keefe D.
It was a BET tour. Where was it at? He went to one in San Diego, went to one in Anaheim, Irvine, and in Vegas. Irvine was summertime.
Puffy's bodyguard, Eugene Deal, also admitted to seeing these guys rolling with Puffy at Bad Boy shows.
These guys from Compton that you said were involved with the Tupac thing, were there any of the other concerts on that tour other than Las Vegas?
Okay.
D also confirmed Keefe D's claim that he had seen Puffy handing out 40 to 50 concert tickets to the Southside Crips.
I think we had to go to Vegas. And it was like, they had to be anywhere from 35 to 50 some Crips in Rome.
And these are all the guys from Compton? Same group of people?
And so they just roll in, and have fun, concert tickets and everything like that. So
Next, we asked Keefe D the $1 million question. On all four of those occasions, there's San Diego, Anaheim, Irvine, and Vegas. Which ones do you actually talk to Puffy at?
Every one.
Every one of them. Which of those four is it when you talk to him about murdering Tupac?
It was really about both of them. Either one. It was
Tupac and Suge, you mean?
Yeah, Anaheim.
After a concert in Anaheim, Keefe D claims that he attended a party with Puffy in a hotel suite. So it's Pharrell, you, Puffy, Zip, and a bunch of Southsiders. And what Puffy makes kind of an announcement.
Yeah, that was stupid as hell too, you know.
What did you actually hear? What was the words? The best you can remember of what he says.
Shit, he said he'd give us anything for the news, you know? Yeah.
Give you anything for these guys' head?
Yo, he said it in front of all those people, I couldn't believe it. You know what I'm saying?
In Anaheim?
Yeah. All room full of Crips.
So this is after Jay got killed. So he was on point. He was worried about something happening.
Yeah.
Still got mouthed off about a bunch of different stuff, so he was scared.
He was scared to death, yeah.
We were a bit taken back by this information. These are very bold claims being made against a very powerful person. It was not something that we took lightly. Claims like these need to be corroborated on multiple levels. Yeah, you know as soon as it goes up the chain of command, they're going to squash the case. Because nobody wants to do business at that level. Because it's just lawsuits and lawsuits and lawsuits. A few months later, at Greenblatt's Deli, Keefe D claimed that Puffy Combs furthered the solicitation. What happened that made it something other than just him frustrated and boasting? Matt, I'll give you guys anything. I mean, what made it a specific, like, hey, I'm serious, I want you guys to kill these guys?
Well, he told me the greenback.
How's it go? How's the conversation go? I mean, okay, listen, I'll do it, but I need $500,000, or, you know, I've got somebody who will do it, but I need $300,000. We need really specific details regarding that.
Yeah, we wanted a million.
You said you walked downstairs. Did he say, come meet me downstairs?
Yeah, he came downstairs and we talked to him.
He tells you, seriously, man, I need to get rid of these guys. I was looking at you in the eyes and it's like scared.
So in your opinion, the specific reason he asked you to come downstairs and talk to him was about that thing, not about liquor or anything. It was about that. Okay.
You tell him we'll do it for $1 million, and he's like, okay, I'll do it for $1 million. He agrees to shake on it or something like that. What happened?
Like, man, we'll wipe their ass out quick, you know, it's nothing.
Who brought up the amount of $1 million?
Shit, he did.
Puffy did?
Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't you?
No, it wasn't me, shit. $1 million, I think, take it for 50. You know what I'm saying? Shit.
So he brought up the $1 million.
Yeah. Them project dudes will kill your ass for 1,500. You know what I'm saying? Shit.
If Keefe D is to be believed, this second solicitation for murder is more serious than the first that could have been discounted as boasting, because now he takes Keefe D aside to have a private conversation to discuss this matter. All the other things Keefe D told us, we could corroborate with other witnesses, but this particular matter just leaves Keefe and Puffy alone. The one piece of corroborating evidence that we did have came in the form of a witness statement from a Southside Crip informant who had advised the police that there was a standing $1 million contract between Bad Boy Records and the Southside Crips. Chuck Phillips wrote this article based on this clue. And he writes this article in the LA Times saying, hey, there's a $1 million bounty put out by Biggie Smalls. But the truth was, that clue said Puffy Combs 10 years before Keefe D ever brought it up.
This is what Keefe D says happened the weekend of Tupac's murder. The day before the Mike Tyson fight, Keefe D eats at Greenblatt's Deli. He then caravans to Las Vegas with his crew, including Zip Martin. Zip is driving his Mercedes, while Keefe goes out in a rented Buick Century.
On Saturday, the day of the fight, Keefe D's nephew Orlando Anderson, along with his friends Terrence Brown and DeAndre Smith, all drive out to Las Vegas to meet up with Keefe D. Guess what they're driving? A white Cadillac.
They came up, I remember it was a white Cadillac. And the Lord was like, that was Tupac, that was Tupac. No, he got shot, no, he got shot.
Who's driving the Cadillac?
Lane and them come to the next day.
They came on Saturday?
Yeah.
Was that a rented Cadillac?
Yeah.
Who rented that Cadillac?
T. Brown.
Yeah, T. Brown.
His mom, right?
Mother.
After the Tyson fight, Keefe D hooks up with Zip and they go to dinner.
Unbeknownst to them, Keefe's nephew, Orlando Anderson, has just been attacked by Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage. In the epitome of bad timing, Tupac Shakur has just attacked the nephew of the individual who claims to have been hired to kill him.
Unlike in his interview with the FBI in the late 1990s, where he had claimed that after Orlando Anderson was beat up, he just simply tried to calm him down, now he told us that they immediately planned a retaliation.
We went to eat. We was eating. And they came and said, you know, beat up, man. We was at a hotel. Yeah. That's the MGM and the restaurant. It was a few New Yorkers, though. We was with them. Like, man, y'all need some help. We got this.
That's what they said?
You guys aren't out in Vegas then with that intention. That's not why you're in Vegas.
We've been going to the fight since that day, you know, the 80s.
So y'all geared up to go to Vegas. Y'all was going anyway. Not even knowing who else was going to be down there. Not knowing if Posse and Chips.
We ain't had no pistol. We ain't had no pistol down there. And,
Zip, who knows about Puffy's offer to Keefe, says this is a good time to take care of that thing.
shit, it was right there. It's a perfect opportunity, baby.
That was Zip talking?
Yeah.
Because of what happened with
Yeah.
Zip offers Keefe D the .40 caliber Glock that he has stashed in his Mercedes out in the parking lot.
He told me in the lobby that he had some Jimmys.
Some what?
He had a Jimmy. And a Benz. He had a little secret compartment. Thing popped out. Popped up. Popped off. Yeah.
In the RS?
Yeah.
Backing up Keefe's story, we had a cooperating witness who was present at the MGM that night after Orlando Anderson was beat down. He testifies to the fact that he sees Orlando Anderson bleeding from the head, and he sees the group get together to start to plan the retaliation. In fact, he heard one of the guys say, "Fuck that shit. What Tupac think this is? We gangbang out here." The witness also confirms that he overheard Zip say, "We have artillery out here," meaning guns.
He tells Zip, hey, we're going to go handle this shit or whatever.
Yeah, they act like, hey, y'all want us to come? You like, we know what them motherfuckers at. They was some of the, they gonna be at the 662 Club.
Who was saying that?
Everybody.
Everybody, okay.
Yeah, everybody.
You get out of the car with Zip after everything. What do you say to him? Like, man, we're going to handle this. Like,
Yeah, we gonna go back there. He like, yeah, shit, perfect time. You know?
okay, then you jump out of the car. And then what happens?
I'll count in the van with the busters. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so Lane Cadillac with T. Brown and Dre.
Yeah.
Y'all go with the van. This is 2 cars. Go to 662.
Yeah, the van and the camera.
Keefe D. Orlando Anderson and half a dozen of the other Crip gang members get into 2 vehicles and drive directly to the 662 Club, where Tupac Shakur is expected to be performing later that night. They park in the parking lot, anticipating Tupac's arrival, and simply lie in wait for him.
They didn't show up. We waited about 15, 20 minutes. They didn't show up. So they was like, let's go get some liquor. And Corey, they're gonna kill him, dog. You know, get the police, kill the motherfuckers and all that. Man, you crazy. We stopped at the liquor store. I got out the van with the ass and look at me. Buster, they scared.
According to Keefe D, some of the guys are getting nervous, so he jumps in the Cadillac with 3 other guys and decides to handle it on their own.
The Cadillac is being driven by Terrence Brown. In the front passenger seat, behind the driver is DeAndre Smith, and in the right rear passenger seat is Keefe's nephew, Orlando Anderson. In addition to Keefe D's statement, we had other evidence confirming that the 4 people he said were in the Cadillac were in fact in Vegas that weekend. Orlando Anderson, of course, was on tape at the MGM, and Keefe D, his uncle, admitted to being there. T. Brown, however, for his part, denied that he was in Vegas that weekend.
Don't tell me that you didn't go to Las Vegas. What you gonna tell me is who you went there with and where you stayed.
However, he was arrested less than a month later with Las Vegas postcards in his possession, and DeAndre Smith confirmed that both he and Brown were in Vegas the night Tupac was shot. With Keefe D and his crew ready to do this, they set out to find Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur.
Then we came up Harmon at the Las Vegas Boulevard, and shit, here they come in that BMW with a gang car.
Keefe D claims that the girls who were riding alongside Tupac and Suge Knight withdrew their attention to the BMW. They're screaming out his name, Tupac, Tupac.
Like, Suge. And he was like, come on, come go with me. Come go with us if you want to do too.
Ross, Tupac, Tupac. There you go. Made the U-turn. We wasn't supposed to make it. Just one of these U-turn. It was in the middle lane. We pulled up one side and checked every car to see where they was.
So what directed your attention to him was some girl shouting at Tupac?
Tupac, he gave himself away. Otherwise, they would have gone away.
Due to traffic conditions and the configuration of Suge and Tupac's caravan, the white Cadillac is forced to pull up on the right side of their BMW.
I thought he was gonna pull on my side. You know, that's one of them heavy ones you got for him. You know, he pulled on his side.
So you were fitting to blast if you had to, or you were just...
Yeah, if we would have been on my side, I would have done it.
Okay. Keefe D, who's seated in the right front passenger seat of the white Cadillac and who has the gun, realizes that he's not going to be in a position to shoot because he's going to have to shoot across the car and across the face of his driver. Keefe D turns around to hand the gun to the back seat, attempting to give it to DeAndre Smith, who would be in the best position to shoot. DeAndre resists, puts his hand up and says, nah, no thanks, not me.
I gave it to Dre. Dre was like, no. Lane's like, dude, fuck.
Orlando Anderson, who's in the right rear passenger, reaches forward and says, give me that motherfucker, leans over DeAndre Smith out the back window of the Cadillac and begins shooting rapidly into the BMW.
So Orlando shot him across Dre?
He leaned over and went around a little pop.
So Orlando would have had to lean over the top of Dre, right?
Yeah, he did.
You say Suge looks over, he sees you? He looks right at you?
Yeah.
Are you looking right now?
Fucking doing each other's we were sitting right here.
Backing up Keefe D's claim that he and Knight knew each other was a witness who was in Las Vegas, part of the death row entourage, who was present during the shooting of Tupac Shakur, who said that Knight stated he knew who the shooters were and that they were Southside Crips.
I seen the boy going Suge again. I thought he was dead.
So Tupac's trying to jump in the back seat. And what Suge was ducking.
He couldn't really duck because he was too big. Yeah.
Keefe D has now identified his own nephew as the murderer of Tupac Shakur.
Bolstering Keefe D's claim was an informant in 1997 who told investigators that Puffy had hired the Southside Crips to kill both Suge and Tupac, and that the Crip who was jumped at the MGM was in the group that had done the hit, and that they originally were going to do it at Suge's Vegas nightclub, but then decided to do it right away instead of waiting. This was exactly the same story that Keefe D told us a decade later. Very few people know that immediately after Tupac is shot and that white Cadillac is fleeing, one of the death row entourage, a guy named Alton McDonald, known as Buntree, chases after the Cadillac, and a second shooting takes place between the two vehicles. Alton McDonald's car is struck. In fact, within the Las Vegas murder files, there's a document that indicates that Alton McDonald's car had been struck by a bullet that night. As a result, Alton McDonald gives up the chase and the white Cadillac disappears into the night. This also counters the claim that Suge had set up the Tupac murder. Why would Suge's main enforcer chase after the suspect's vehicle and exchange gunfire if they were all part of the same conspiracy? For his part, Keefe D affirms in his interview that a second shooting does take place. However, he misidentifies the car that's following them as the girls in the green Sebring.
We made the right and some frauds and Sebring was following us. Stupid bitches.
Somebody started shooting this way, they're shooting that way. So we're in the midst of all of this gunfire, and only thing we can think of is get out of there.
Lane starts blasting back on him?
Yeah.
So he had bullets left?
Afterwards, when you guys are rolling, we went to park the car by the carriage house. This is a parking lot on the opposite side of the carriage house. We left the car in, put the gun on the tire and left.
On the tire, front wheel tire, back tire, what?
Front.
After y'all left the gun on the tire, where'd you guys go?
And smoke weed and drink.
Wait.
What?
Hotel?
In the hotel.
Coincidentally, Suge Knight's BMW had come to a stop on Las Vegas Boulevard near Harmon, which was only about a block from where the shooters had ditched the Cadillac.
They pulled up in the ambulance while we standing right there. Take our bullshit.
You guys on the street with
We on Las Vegas Boulevard at the crosswalk, and they pull up down now right next to us.
with him in the car already?
Tupac and Suge in the car.
And y'all just
It's close.
Did they see you?
They can't see. We didn't give a fuck. We know what they said about the ambulance park right here. Right next to it. That shit was funny as a motherfucker. I ain't ever told nobody else.
The following day, they return to the Cadillac, recover the murder weapon, and ensure that there are no discarded casings left inside the vehicle. Then Keefe D and the rest of the Crips return to Los Angeles.
After Tupac was shot, the New Yorkers went home and told Puffy's bodyguard Eugene Deal exactly what had happened in Las Vegas. In his police interview, he got all the details right.
It was just Daddy and some other people I know from New York. They were in Vegas the night Pop got killed. You know what I'm saying? They arrived in the same crib that rolled with us to Vegas that time. And Pop seen them. And Pop stepped to them and said, those are those mark-ass niggas that be fucking with them niggas from New York. That's what was said.
Now, were you there for this?
No, I wasn't there.
You were told it.
I was told it. I thought it was pretty hearsay. And one of the kids had ripped off one of Pac's friends, you know, a long time ago or something like that. You know, I think it's a fight group broke out. You know what I'm saying? And that's how that incident happened. And one of the kids called his uncle, who was a head, one of the head guys in Compton and stuff like that. And then next thing you know, Pac was shot up.
We also found an informant who was a Southside Crip and associate of all these guys who confirmed Keefe D's story.
Who was in Las Vegas that you know on that deal, on that night that Tupac got killed?
Okay, Milo, Keith, T. Brown, Dre.
More importantly, this informant claimed that he had personally seen Orlando Anderson and DeAndre Smith in a white Cadillac in Compton the day after Tupac was shot, and that DeAndre, not Orlando, had bragged about shooting Tupac.
Dre and Orlando, they came back bragging about what happened out there. He seen Tupac and Big Suge, I think, in a BMW, and he said he let off on him.
Man, I let off on Tupac.
Dre said he himself let off on him. What does let off on him mean?
Shooting a person. Like it was a big old joke or something. Like it was a big joke. You can tell when a person's nervous. Like he was nervous when they got back talking. You know, you can tell he had nervousness in him.
The informant also confirmed what Keefe D had said about the Cadillac being a rental car.
Yeah, that was a rental car they had.
How'd you know that Cadillac was a rental car?
Every time time they go to Vegas, they get a rental car. They get a rental car because if you going out of town and the police ever find something in there, it's a rental car. They can't really put it on them. If you see Keith right now, 9 times out of 10, he in a rental car right now.
Who besides yourself down there knows, for one, knows about these guys killing Tupac?
Shit, I'm pretty sure everybody around there knows about it.
We now had evidence that pointed to Orlando Anderson as the killer of Tupac Shakur. With the benefit of hindsight, it now seemed obvious. If, prior to our interviews with Keefe D in late 2008, I'd been asked to put together a list of the most likely suspects, he'd have been at the top of the list. Knowing that didn't make us great detectives, it was just common sense.
I had a person I was talking to who told me that she was related to Orlando Anderson, and she told me that at family gathering, Orlando Anderson would brag about killing Tupac.
Orlando was so committed to boasting about the shooting of Tupac that even his uncle Keefe D had to scold him and tell him to keep his mouth shut and quit talking about it. But instead, Orlando Anderson goes on CNN with his attorney.
I mean, I've been thinking, maybe I'm like scapegoat or something. I just want to let everybody know. You know what I'm saying? I didn't do it.
Immediately after the murder of Tupac Shakur, Compton police knew that Orlando Anderson was involved. They knew this because of their confidential informants, Southside Crip informants who were telling them so. In fact, they conducted search warrants and even arrested Orlando Anderson. Unfortunately, though, for Las Vegas police, there wasn't enough evidence for prosecution. Orlando Anderson lawyered up, and everything else was just circumstantial, not enough to get a criminal filing.
There was one more piece of evidence tying Orlando Anderson to this case that shocked the task force when they discovered it. Going back to the murder of Suge's friend and bodyguard, Jake Robles, at the nightclub in Atlanta, the incident that took the feud between Death Row and Bad Boy to the next level. They found an interview that Russell Poole had conducted with the nightclub security guard, who was an off-duty Atlanta police officer named Deputy Howard. In this interview from 1997, they showed Howard an MGM Grand security video of Orlando Anderson and a photo of Keefe's friend, Corey Edwards. Deputy Howard was absolutely positive that both Orlando Anderson and Corey Edwards were at the club and that they were among the suspects in the Robles shooting.
Deputy Howard also stated that the altercation that took place inside of the club was between Robles and Suge and a guy in a powder blue jacket. At one point, Suge told the guy in the blue jacket, "I know your family. I know your mama. I know your family." He also told Robles after he was shot, "Hush, I'll take care of this when we get back on our own turf." Now, why would Suge Knight say, "I know your family," or that we can take care of this when we get back to Los Angeles, to a person that was a member of Bad Boy from New York City? Making the connection for us, Deputy Howard confirmed that the person that was in the powder blue jacket was none other than Orlando Anderson.
Within a month of returning from Las Vegas after the Tupac murder, Suge Knight is arrested for a parole violation for his participation in the stompdown of Orlando Anderson.
Desperate to get himself out of his predicament, Suge Knight then offers Orlando Anderson upwards of $16,000 to testify on his behalf that he wasn't actually attempting to assault Orlando, but was trying to help him. So Orlando Anderson, who has just shot and killed Tupac Shakur and struck Suge Knight in that hail of gunfire, is now being summoned and solicited by Knight himself to perjure himself on Knight's behalf in court.
The mindset of doing business with him was to try to stop him from doing 9 years and keeping the fall of Death Row from happening.
Keefe D accompanied Orlando Anderson to the attorney's office when this deal was made. He wasn't happy about it. He thought that Orlando Anderson was selling out. Some might wonder, well, why didn't Suge go after Keefe D and kill him? But there are a lot of variables and a lot at play here. Suge Knight was now in jail and was going to be serving the better part of 8 years. While he's in jail, Keefe D then goes to jail. Suge Knight also knows that Keefe
hot wing spot near Hollywood.
Okay, so you get back to LA the next day, Zip calls you, says, meet you at the hot wing place. Where?
Into my piece.
Melrose in the morning. You guys go over there, Zip shows up, you guys, what happens after? What's the conversation with you and Zip?
Paul Kimball called it, was that us? He told me, yeah, it was us. Faye called him. He said, we'll go get our little money. All right, I'm gonna go back out to you.
Okay, so Puff called Zip and said, was that us? Faye called Zip and said, was that us?
What you talking about too? Yeah.
When you're at the hot wing place talking to Zip,
Paul, he called me.
on Zip's phone or your phone?
On Zip phone.
And Zip gives you the phone?
Yeah. And we'll say, was that us? Zip was like, yeah, that's us.
What's his response?
He was happy as hell, shit.
Did you ask him about his money? About your money, I mean? When you get paid or whatever?
No, say that on the phone. Zip, go get our cash.
Okay, so you tell Zip we need to get paid. What does Zip say? I'm gonna go back home.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him some.
Approximately 6 weeks later, Keefe D hasn't been paid yet, so he meets with Zip to ask about the money. Zip tells him that he hasn't received the money from Puffy yet.
Since you've been out of prison, have you talked to Zip?
Not one time.
And then what about Puffy?
Not one time.
Okay.
I tried to call him several times, though. That little daddy out here.
You got messages?
Hell yeah.
Keefe D claimed to have run into an associate of Puffy's named Darius D. Mac Rogers. According to Keefe, D. Mac claimed that Puffy had given Zip $500,000, but that Zip had never forwarded that money to Keefe.
When I make all your boy, he like, man, what's that still mad behind? What's Zip behind that shit? Zip got that money. I'm like, what? He like, yeah, man, dude gave Zip the money.
Puffy and Zip fall out, right?
Behind him making the payments to Zip.
Zip keeps the money.
Zip kept the money from his store.
And gives mail to that big and kid.
Yeah, all that.
Is Biggie ever involved in any of these conversations about his
No.
Tupac? It was always just Puff and Zip.
Think he knew about it, or he was just like, whatever, he's doing his own thing?
He was like doing his own thing. Last kind of kept him kind of,
Out the window.
yeah.
So this is all Puffy doing.
Yeah. I think if you could have just gave us half the money, you know what I'm saying? All the stay strong. Like fuck it.
As part of our investigative strategy, our next step was to use Keefe D against Zip the same way that we had used Hammond against Keefe D, essentially as an informant, in which we could use Keefe D against Zip and set him up in a sting operation. Using our federal funding and resources, on June 17th of 2008, we escorted Keefe D back to New York. We had identified the nightclub that Zip owned, called the Zip Code in Harlem. We waited until the opportunity presented itself to introduce Keefe back to Zip. On the second attempt, we succeed. Zip shows up at the club, Keefe D's there, and the two of them unite after many years. After some small talk and reacquainting themselves with one another, Keefe suggests that they resurrect their prior drug relationship. Zip says, listen, I've got cancer, I'm struggling, I'm too old for this. However, let me introduce you to my nephew. He's in a position to help you out. According to the Drug Enforcement Administration, this nephew of Zip's is actually a lieutenant in Zip's narcotic organization. We believe that Zip is merely testing Keefe D to see what his true intentions are.
Zip's no amateur at this game. He's going to be harder to set up than Keefe D was. With the Tupac investigation making good progress, the task force still had to focus on their original goal of solving the Biggie Smalls murder, which they had been investigating simultaneously. After disproving Russell Poole's David Mack theory, and now ruling out Keefe D and the Crips as Biggie's killers, they were left with one prevailing theory, that Suge Knight had members of the Mob Piru Bloods murder Biggie Smalls. With Tupac dead and Suge Knight in prison for his parole violation, Death Row Records began to crumble. On top of that, bodies had started falling. In 1997, one of Suge's bodyguards, Aaron Heron Palmer, was gunned down at a Compton stoplight.
Another bodyguard of Suge's, Alton Buntry McDonald, and Death Row employee Henry Hen Dog Smith had also been killed. McDonald and his passenger Neckbone were the ones who had exchanged gunfire with Tupac's killer in Vegas, and Hen Dog was the one who had designed the Death Row logo.
In 2003, Suge Knight's close friend and confidant, Wardell Poochie Faust, was shot 10 times in the back and killed while riding his motorcycle through Compton.
In 2005, Suge Knight lost a $107 million lawsuit to a man named Harry O, who had vested startup money in Death Row Records. This and a huge IRS bill led to Suge Knight filing for bankruptcy. Suffice it to say, by the time we caught up with Suge Knight, he had lost Death Row Records and was a shadow of his former self.
The task force learned that the FBI had launched a racketeering investigation into Death Row back in the 90s, but had ultimately abandoned it. They decided to resurrect that case, hoping to find witnesses who would flip against Suge.
Unfortunately, the racketeering case went nowhere, but it would lead to the one witness that would break the case open.
In 1996, prior to Tupac's murder, Suge Knight had commissioned for a 1961 Chevy Impala to be customized as a gift for Tupac. The cover art for Tupac's album, All Eyes on Me, was airbrushed across the trunk. Unfortunately, Tupac didn't live long enough to receive the gift. After changing hands several times, the Impala ended up in front of a body shop in El Monte, California. Supposedly, Suge found out about it, and some of his associates went to the body shop to pressure the owner into giving it back. After locating the Impala at a Long Beach pawn shop, the task force discovered that the person who had taken it there was one of Suge Knight's longtime girlfriends.
Suge's most trusted girlfriend, who we're going to refer to under the alias of Teresa Swan, was the mother of one of his children. She was also criminally complicit in some of Suge's nefarious business activities. Teresa Swan had a long history of fraud and perjury with a half a dozen fake identities. Our big break with Teresa Swan came when her name came up in the middle of an auto theft ring where the thieves were using fraudulent loan applications to purchase vehicles and then in turn selling them at a discount price. In addition to the evidence of her involvement in this auto theft ring, we discovered that she was involved in Suge Knight's bankruptcy fraud. So we now had two very serious things to hold over her head. We're about to ask Teresa Swan to do something against her every instinct. Drop the dime on Suge Knight.
On March 17th of 2009, the task force had its first meeting with Teresa Swan at a Starbucks in Santa Fe Springs.
To evaluate the initial extent of her cooperation and what she was willing to tell us, we decided to focus on the subjects of the auto theft investigation and the bankruptcy fraud. In fact, we brought with us an IRS agent to further that deception. We outlined what she was facing in those charges, and she responded, "Listen, you've got to understand, I only did what you told me. That's all I ever did. I got kids. I got to look out for them." Since that first meeting went relatively well, we arranged a second meeting with Teresa Swan at another Starbucks in Pasadena. This time we got down to brass tacks. My homicide partner, Darren Dupree, asked Teresa, "Do you know why we're really here? Do you know why we're really here?" And I told her, "We're homicide detectives. We want to know who killed Biggie Smalls." Now she begins sobbing. So Darren and I excuse ourselves from the table momentarily, leaving her alone with an FBI agent working the case with us. He walks over to us a few minutes later with an ear-to-ear smile, saying she knows. With that, we knew that a Starbucks was not the setting for full disclosure, so we elected to set up another meeting under more stringent circumstances at the DEA headquarters.
In preparation for their third meeting with Teresa Swan, the task force scoured the case files. They noticed that one name kept popping up, Wardell Poochie Faust. Poochie was Suge Knight's friend who was killed while riding his motorcycle in Compton in 2003.
An FBI informant had claimed that Poochie was one of Suge Knight's shooters. One particular incident involving Poochie was the murder of an individual named William Ratcliffe, who was a bounty hunter in the Nickerson Gardens housing project, who had threatened Suge. run to ground on the streets of Compton and executed. Suge allegedly said in regard to Poochie's actions, "He doesn't fuck around, that's how I want him to do it." We also discovered prison letters from a blood named Roderick Reed, written in 2004. Communications between him and the discredited FBI informant Kevin Hackett. In Roderick Reed's letters, he mentions on several occasions that he knows that Poochie is the one who killed Biggie Smalls. Considering Roderick Reed's blood background and the fact that his co-defendant on the case for which he is in prison was none other than George Williams, one of Suge's trusted friends and enforcers, this gave Roderick Reed's information considerable credibility. We wanted to go and question Reed, but because his case was on appeal, the United States Attorney's Office precluded us from doing that. But what we do have is these letters further corroborating Poochie's involvement in the murder of Biggie Smalls. In the meantime, we decided to approach Reggie Wright Jr., the owner of Right Way Protective Services. They provided all this security for Death Row Records. When we met with Reggie Wright Jr., the most interesting thing he had to say was when he described the unique relationship that Suge Knight had with Wardell Poochie Fowles. He described it as a very secretive relationship, that they would always go off to the side to talk, that Poochie didn't hang out like all the other gang members. Very different.
They had a relationship where they knew each other and he would come around, but to be honest, they kept their relationship private. It would be Suge and maybe a girl and myself when they would meet. It wasn't like all of the homies. Down low would maybe be a bad word, but that would be the word that you would probably best describe it.
For the third meeting with Teresa Swan, the task force created a ruse. They drafted fake documents, including a driver's license with Poochie's photo under the name of Darnell Bolton, one of Poochie's known aliases. They also created a fake confession letter appearing to have come from Poochie before he died, signed under the same alias of Darnell Bolton.
This authentic-looking fake confession letter detailed the murder as we believed it happened.
Specifically, Poochie's fake confession stated that Suge Knight had hired him to kill Biggie in retaliation for the murder of Tupac. The letter then listed Teresa Swan as a co-conspirator to make her believe that Poochie had dropped a dime on her years earlier.
To make it look more authentic, we put a fake law firm letterhead and redacted out certain sections. Lastly, the fake confession letter was dated April 1st, 1998, April Fool's Day. It was a calculated risk we took in introducing that fake confession letter. If the information in that letter wasn't true, then Teresa Swan would know that and call our bluff, and the whole strategy would be upended. On May 28th of 2009, we sat down with Teresa Swan at police headquarters. At the very beginning of our meeting, it's very tense. Teresa Swan is crying uncontrollably. She also says, if Suge ever finds out about this, ... clearly indicating that if Suge ever finds out that she's cooperating, there'd be a price to pay. Understanding her predicament, we assured her that we could protect her.
You know we'll do our best to handle the situation.
She looked at us sarcastically, saying,
How are you gonna handle Suge?
some people may take issue as whether or not they think it's an ethical approach to essentially lie to witnesses. We call it conducting a ruse. It's completely a standard that's used in law enforcement investigations all the time. It's much like in that scene from LA Confidential where the detective is playing two suspects against each other that are in different interrogation rooms.
Said they called you Sugar, and she gave it up. So sweet.
Lewis gave it up to see this, man. And I was the fucking boy knocking my door. Lewis was the sissy.
Ray Collins just ratted you off. Said the night out was your idea. I think it was Ray's idea. Talk, I think I can save your life.
It was essentially the same thing, except in this case, one of the suspects was speaking from the grave.
Since they'd mentioned Teresa Swan by name in Poochie's fake confession letter, she was led to believe that she'd already been exposed, and that now was the time to deal with it.
So after she gains her composure, we show her this fake sheaf of documents, which she reviews and pauses, looking up at us, and says, "What Poochie said, that's what happened." Now that we've broken the ice, Teresa Swan goes on to say that after the shooting of Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas and Suge Knight going to jail, that he was as mad as she'd ever seen him. He was enraged. Teresa Swan further explains that Suge Knight's attorney drafted a letter instructing the LA County Sheriff's Department to allow Teresa Swan into the attorney-client privileged area. So now we have Teresa Swan meeting with Suge Knight at the county jail under the false pretenses that she's part of his legal team. This, of course, allows her to have conversations with him that cannot be monitored or overheard. On Suge's orders, Teresa had a couple of meetings with Poochie at a Denny's in Lakewood. Poochie asked her how he was going to get paid for the hit, and she assured him that once it was done, she'd get him the money.
The only thing about that ever made me raise any type of eyebrows regarding the possibility of someone being involved in the Biggie assassination would be a request from Norris Anderson, who was the general manager of the company at the time, to think of a way, or did I know of a way, to get $25,000 of cash to one of Suge's female friends.
When Suge Knight had bought his 1995 Chevy Impala, he had also purchased a Chevy Impala from Poochie.
There were rumored to be that Suge and he bought an Impalas at George Chevrolet in Bellflower, California at the same time.
Teresa Swan herself attends the vibe party at the Peterson Auto Museum, but claims she left prior to the shooting and did not see Poochie there. She says that she didn't see Poochie again until a couple of weeks after Biggie's murder, when he called her to ask for some of the money. She notices that his Impala appears to have been recently painted. Teresa explains that she made 2 payments to Poochie. The initial one was for $9,000. However, he comes back later to collect an additional $4,000 so that he can get out of town. Now, when we do the math, there's $13,000 doled out to Poochie. The contract was supposedly for $25,000, so assumedly, the remaining $12,000 was retained by Teresa Swan for her role in the conspiracy. Now, with Keefe D's confession and Teresa Swan's confession, both these parallel investigations are really starting to fall together. The murder of Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas, and the murder of Biggie Smalls in Los Angeles. We have Keefe D ready to make another run at Zip in New York, and I'm writing an affidavit to wiretap Suge Knight's phone to solicit incriminating statements. We have accomplished in these 3 years of investigative work more than had been accomplished in the previous decade. We're right at the threshold of solving both of these murders, and then the rug gets pulled out from under us. In hindsight, it appears that we accomplished exactly what the LAPD had wanted all along. Gather enough evidence to disprove Poole's theory and get out from under that potential $400 million lawsuit that Biggie's family had waged. Perhaps it was the LAPD's opinion. The shooters in both of these murders are dead. And although the co-conspirators are still walking free, maybe it's best just to let sleeping dogs lie. On the one hand, we had vindicated the department from those false allegations about being involved in the murder. But on the other hand, it was very disheartening having gathered the evidence that we did, and the LAPD not having the fortitude to continue forward.
Keefe D, he confessed to Orlando Anderson, his nephew, killing Tupac, right?
Yeah.
But, and I brought this up in our interview, I talked to someone who was there during the shooting. That was in the car behind Tupac's car. And what he said is that the arm that stuck out the window that shot up the BMW was a bulky arm. It was not a skinny arm. It was a bulky, hefty looking arm.
Who the witness?
Can't say.
Okay, they lying.
Orlando was skinny. Right. The other people in that car were not. Although Orlando got blamed for it, and Orlando took it, he became like a big star, you know, a legend in his hood over it. There is a chance that he was not even the shooter.
Let me just ask you point blank, did you kill Tupac Shakur?
First of all, it's like I didn't kill Tupac.
Keefe D, he confessed to Orlando.
There was one game where Allen Iverson threatened Steve Giotti, and we felt as a
Now, Tupac's brother, Mopreme Shakur, says Diddy called him and he sounded all guilty trying to cover his tail, saying he had nothing to do with Tupac's death. Let's get into the show. We're going to listen to this clip. I'm going to come back with my commentary.
Puffy called me though. Puffy called me back in the day. He called me, he was like, I just want you to know I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. I know who you are, but we never met. And I just want to call you man to man, let you know that I ain't have nothing to do with your brother's death. Now, why was he calling me, reaching out to me? Because LA Times had just dropped, it was in the early 2000s, LA Times had just dropped an article in the newspaper implicating him as well. I told him I appreciate the call, but the truth is yet to come out, so we gonna see.
And I remember that article, man. And the guy that wrote that article, he actually did a few Tupac interviews when Tupac was still living. So, yeah, that's crazy, man. So Puffy, he called you trying to plead his innocence.
Well, him and I think him and C's was on the radio out here, and Big Boy, shout out to Big Boy, he hit me up. He was like, yo, man, Puffy, see, they want to talk to you about the whole situation about your brother. And, especially back then, I wanted all the information I could get. And I heard what he said, but, the shit been so chaotic, I ain't know which way to go until you find out more information. And, yeah, that was the early 2000s.
Did Little C say anything to you?
Not that I recall.
Yeah, that sounds like a guy that's guilty, man. Him calling you trying to plead his innocence.
Yeah, man, he could have been trying to cover his ass, or he could have been sincere. We gonna see.
It's just too many attachments to Diddy, man. At some point, you gotta start looking like, yo, what's going on? I mean, when Tupac got shot at Quad, they was talking about Diddy. When Tupac got killed in Vegas, they was talking about Diddy. At some point, man, you gotta start looking at them like, yo, what's going on, yo?
Yeah, and you got people like, Katie is out, doing interviews and talking about, it be feeling like he got sympathy for Puffy because he was scared. Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get Pac killed. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's weird. But we gonna see, time will tell. And on top of it, he had his own problems with Suge, before Pac. So,
Yeah, I get it. You shouldn't be scared, nigga. You know? But, hey, you know, like I said, man, Pac would have boxed him. Pac would have loved to beat his ass in the ring, raise some money, and give it to the hood.
Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. Diddy name just keeps coming up, Now, we heard what Tupac brother, Mo Prem Shakur, had to say. We heard what he had to say. And the crazy part about it is, remember when Tupac was coming to see Biggie, and he got shot 5 times in the elevator going up to Bad Boy Records, okay? Now, word on the street is, your boy Diddy paid some New York City street goons to take out Tupac. Remember that, it failed that time, okay? Which it might be a lot of truth to that as well. It's crazy because he got shot going to see Biggie, going up to Bad Boy Records in the elevator, and that's word on the street. That was the first time Puff had paid some people to get rid of Tupac. Man, oh man, where there is smoke, there's some fire. Like 50 Cent said, man, P. Diddy better lawyer up. It's a lot of fingers is pointing right at Diddy. Like I said, he had his beef with, you heard him, he said he had beef with your boy, Suge Knight and everything else, man. It was just a lot going on at that time, man, trying to eliminate the competition. I'm your boy Zillionaire. Put your thoughts in the comments, man. Like I said, we gonna cover this mother freaking story. I'm gonna stay on this story, man. We gonna everything. Listen. I'm covering everything, man, so we can put all these pieces together.
Me too.
Hey, what's up, Diddy? How you doing?
His mother didn't even get to see his murder get solved. This is a sad situation. We see this in the hood every single day, and a lot of people don't really look at it as if it's detrimental to the stuff that they doing. No, they sit there, they go out there, they trust the wrong person, and next thing you know, he's in the passenger seat of a boss man car. Suge Knight had a club in Vegas. Suge Knight had rank in Vegas. It was no way that they couldn't protect Tupac as well as they was protecting everybody else who was there. I want y'all to really look at this, man. This is something.
And I did an interview with Angie Martinez, and she asked me, how did I feel about Puffy and Biggie? And I told her that I liked their music and I want to do music with them. Death Row didn't like that. Tupac didn't like that, so we had a misunderstanding. So on the flight back to LA, I didn't feel comfortable around them for what they had did, as far as I didn't let my security ride with me. So to protect myself and to, prevent shit from happening, I slept under a blanket with the knife and the fork just in case something was to go wrong, but it didn't. And that was just me being precautious, because I felt like when I said what I said, there was a fine line between being mad and being like,
we all can put our eyes on, and we can really open the door and really look at the fact that Tupac was the main one who tried to keep the whole beef down. He tried to squash the beef before Puffy said that he didn't want to hear it. Once Puffy said he didn't want to hear nothing that was going on, they tried to squash it. They used to hang together.
Exactly, and when Diddy's bodyguard got off the shift and went to bodyguard for Mike Tyson for that fight, he's the one who gave him the drop to tell Mike Tyson to tell Tupac to lay low that night. This is the reason why, in the alternate universe, Tupac really should have signed with Mike Tyson, because he could have took Suge Knight one-on-one, man. And at the end of the day, y'all got to realize, at that night, in September 7th, 1996 in Vegas, the only person that had Tupac's back in the whole entire area was Mike Tyson, but he was on the stage, and Tupac actually brought him out with his song, man. This is a sad situation. This is a hip-hop legend. Everybody got to realize and learn from this and basically know how to maneuver when you actually a superstar at that level. The whole entire street life, the politics, the different crews and cliques that was all in the picture, the different people, celebrities, famous, Will Smith, Jada. This whole thing come back to full circle because it's a revolving door, and this case is about to get solved. So y'all got to tune back in and make sure you subscribe to the channel. I want you guys to like this video if you want justice for Tupac.
Everybody know Tupac, he would have been right here, right now, with us if it wasn't for Puffy. Why do they take the good people and leave the people who basically set up the situation here? Puffy, yeah, we talking about you. Puffy, you need to fall back, man. It's bogus what happened with Gene Deal falling out with you. Then next thing you know, Lil C's fell out with you. Lil C's said that they pulled up. They had no suspicion this was about to happen. He said they canceled the rest of the show that they was having at that club. And I want everybody to understand, when they was standing on stage, Biggie had the cane. And this goes back and makes you wonder, why did they end the show that quick and then have Biggie to hop in the car with the other security? He was in the car with Lil C's, Don, and a couple more other people. We know for a fact that the other truck that was in front of him was Puffy. Why wasn't Puffy in that car? Why did the dudes creep up? Why was the ladies on the corner? The dudes crept up, raised the window right down, and started blowing like they knew Biggie was in that front seat and nobody saw Biggie get in that passenger seat. How could you know which side to shoot up? It was no holes and no other door but Biggie's side. I want everybody to really look at what's going on because it's a sad situation that had to happen, but we know this happened from time to time. Puffy skirted off, and from what Gene Deal, he's trying to get to the end of this, and he won't justice for Pac and Biggie because he was rocking with Biggie before he was rocking with Pac. I want everybody to throw them 222s down in the comment section if you rocking with Tupac. I want everybody to look at this. This is a sad situation, and my condolences goes out to Tupac's family. We saw Puffy skirt off right when the light was turning red. As soon as the light started turning red, Puffy drove straight through the light. Next thing you know, Biggie and them stopped at the light. This is why Dude and them pulled right up on the side. They was targeting Biggie. Why did they make Biggie leave the club and they knew he was on the cane? Biggie was already messed up. So why would you shoot up somebody who already hurt?
Exactly. This is why as soon as they heard the very first pop, Gene Deal jumped out that passenger seat. He ran to Biggie because he knew at the end of the day that they was in LA and Biggie was from New York. All of them were from New York. So they tried to make it seem like it was a whole street move and everything. This is why everybody was actually saying that. They trying to actually amp up the East Coast, West Coast. They trying to actually make it seem like they tried to take Biggie out, man. And the only person who was actually worried about getting touched from the East Coast, West Coast was P. Diddy. He's the one who actually said with his own words that Gene Deal said he heard that he don't care if Biggie gotta get sent up and if Pac gotta get sent up. He does not care because at the end of the day, P. Diddy only was thinking for himself. When he realized how much money he was making, when he seen that the dudes who was actually